5. Hello and welcome, connoisseurs of fine common cardboard, to today's very special live stream, where today we have the triumphant return of my co-host, former co-host, the beginner of the tryhard cEDH and cpedh channel. We've got Clay. How you doing, buddy? Good to see you, man.
I'm doing good. So we're gonna look at each other.
Yeah, we can basically, we're going to be doing a little bit of this. Today is very exciting, not just because we have Clay, not just because we have a really cool set of cards to build with, not just because we have a great commander, but we're testing some new systems. I flew this by the seat of my pants today. We got in touch with a developer from a great piece of software that I'll be talking about later to be able to get Clay in this video here with me with no background, which is very exciting. And if you've been wondering why I haven't been doing co-hosted videos lately, it's because the green screen was a big shift in the systems, and now that we've got it going, we can do some really cool stuff. So really stoked and thankful, Clay, that you were able to get on board with this and send it. If you all let me know whether the audio is coming through clean and clear, because we are using a different audio capture system as well. So just let me know in the chat if everything's going well. But let's get started with this. So backtracking a little bit, a couple weeks ago, I did a stream on Galloping Lizrog and Zemek Guildmage, but more importantly, it was about slimes. And the card that we're talking about is, of course, Slime Against Humanity. So let's take a look at this card really quick. It's a 2 and a green for a sorcery. It's going to make a 0/0 green ooze creature token with trample, very important. It's going to put X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is 2 plus the total number of cards you have in exile and in your graveyard, also very important. This is Crackling Drake text, which is great because, Clay and I are kind of, I think, well known for our endeavors in Crackling Drake and pretty experienced with that. That bit of text on Sailor's Bane, Slime Against Humanity, and Crackling Drake is the reason to play them, right? And it's going to look at the number of skoozes and Slimes Against Humanity in your graveyard or in exile. And you can have any number of them. Now, this card is really made a lot of waves. There's not a huge diversity of decks, I think, currently that are trying to slot this in. But there are a lot of really promising homes for it. And the one that you, Clay, brought to my attention during our look at the slimes was Witherbloom Apprentice, and this is
which is super funny.
Oh,
it's hilarious.
It really is. When we think back to our journeys in cPDH, not only are we talking about Crackling Drake, but one of my first cPDH decks that I was really pushing for was a control version of Witherbloom Apprentice, and it was great. It preyed on the fact that it was the third or even fourth scariest thing at the table, but it had explosive win conditions with storming off, and meanwhile it just ground and generated value and held on to the initiative in the Monarch. And the thing that's changed since that time is that there are a lot more creatures and they're a lot better. And just in the time between when I was playing Witherbloom Apprentice 3 years ago, right, and now. And what that means is that the control win conditions of Initiative and Monarch become a lot harder to hold on to with decks like TPI, with Gut, with Abdel even, where you don't really want to be deploying, you don't want to have sweepers all the time just to defend those things, right? You want to be able to control them. And back in the day, if you got Initiative, there was a real good chance nobody was going to be able to get it back from you, right? Or if they did, it was bounce your commander, hit you with the scout, or hit you with an untapper or something. And even then, it just wasn't even really worth it. You'd rather be combo killing the table. Nowadays, it is different. There are a lot of creatures. This format is just full of creatures that are able to block and push damage. And this is something that I've definitely been encouraging people to do, is just put a lot more creatures in your deck. This is a creature-based format. Witherbloom Apprentice has never really had access to good creatures. We had Trumpeting Herd, which was probably the best one. 4 mana, rebound, make a 3/3 elephant token. I think it might have trample, and then you do it again on your upkeep. So 2 triggers, 6 power, pretty good. Then you had Shadow Beast Sighting, which was a 4 mana 4/4, and then a 7 mana 4/4. So 2 triggers, a lot of mana, but you could make bodies. And then we had Moan of the Unhallowed, right? And it really just wasn't that great. And anytime you played a creature card, it was not a trigger, right? Every time you play an artifact card, it was not a trigger. Now we have Slime Against Humanity. It is a spell, so every time we cast a slime, we're going to drain our opponent. Now, I see that as a form of haste, we're basically granting a small form of haste to all of our slimes. If you play a 3/3 slime, say you go mill on turn 1, put a slime into the graveyard, turn 2, Witherbloom Apprentice, turn 3, play a slime, it hits everybody for 1, we do 3 damage to the table, and we gain a little bit of life, and we get a slime. So, with that, Clay, I want you to tell me a little bit about what you had in mind, and we're going to talk about this before we go into either of our decks here, because
Mhm.
independently, without really talking to each other too much, we've come up with our own lists, and maybe today we'll kind of bring them together and figure out what's going to work best. So, picking up an audio echo.
Yeah, is that me?
Picking up an audio echo. Interesting. Let's figure that out really quick here.
Maybe
We're
because
in.
two feeds, one feed from the
Are you
Ninja
in
and the other
OBS
feed.
right now?
I am not.
Okay. So I have
But
Erosium. Can you clarify?
you
Are
do
you
have
getting
a
any audio
Discord.
echo, Clay?
I am not. But I'm not
Okay.
listening to the video either. I'm watching the.
Got it. Okay. Because basically what we have is he and I can hear each other through Discord. I have my Discord input muted right now. And then we have another software.
Mm,
Both of you have an echo.
interesting.
Oh, I'm so sorry, everybody. Thanks for letting me know, because that's this is one of the things that I've been warned about. So, so the way this works is we're gonna
Why
go
don't we switch
into
to the Discord audio and turn off the inputs for the Ninja?
Discord audio.
Yeah, so turn your Discord audio back on, and then I'll. How do I?
It's gone. He's saying it's gone now. So if we just keep talking here, so we'll just keep talking, and then if they tell us the echo is still there, then we can. Yeah, that's a good question. Can you guys hear Clay? And thanks for your patience, everybody. We're trying out a new system here, and we're just gonna roll with the punches. So, yeah. Yep, let us know if you can hear Clay. Because if your audio is off, let's see. Yo, yo, yo. Did you? So, okay, interesting. No, we cannot now. Yeah, so the thing is that we have to have your audio. So here's what we'll do. Okay, so chat, this will leave it a little bit of a, there'll be a little bit of a delay with Clay's voice, but turn your audio back on, Clay.
Okay, audio back on.
Oh, you know what? Oh, no, that
What?
wouldn't make any sense. Okay, so what we'll do is I'm going to turn the audio off for OBS Ninja
Yep.
and Discord on. Okay.
Okay.
And
Yeah, that's what I was.
yeah,
That's
but
what I wanted you to.
right. But the thing is, the guy that makes this software, he says if you do that, there will be a little bit of a delay between your voice
Oh,
and because there's a latency between when I get your video and not. It should be like 200 milliseconds or less.
right
But
on.
anyways, we'll go with that. All right, cool. Let's get back to the program here. Thank you everybody for your patience. We're working with new systems here. This is super exciting for me
Yeah.
because being able to put two people on the screen like this at the same time is like the basis of this show. I love having co-hosts on, and I haven't been able to because I haven't. These systems are complicated basically, and life is hard, and OBS is
Yeah.
hard. Anyways, so just to get us back on track here, during that presentation, Clay was like, "What about What about Witherbloom?" And I was like, "Oh, whoa, that's crazy!" So we set up a time to do this, right? And now we are here. We're going to be building around Witherbloom Apprentice. So Clay, when you
My
were
my thoughts. Yeah.
yeah, when you were thinking about the Witherbloom Apprentice, tell me a little bit, walk us through a little bit about how you envisioned this commander playing with slimes, maybe a little bit about the archetype, any other dynamics you want to mention along the way.
So for me personally, well, let's start before that. In our Ryan had already said in our conversations previously that it was a shame that everything in Witherbloom at the time was not necessarily a non-permanent, or excuse me, was a creature or some other permanent base you had to play. Oh, crystal clear! Yay! But yeah, it was a shame that we couldn't just lean wholly into the Magecraft ability and just get away from all of the things that don't trigger, right? So when I saw the slimes, Witherbloom was the first thing that I thought of because we always wanted not well. Uh, I wanted to storm with Witherbloom as always. Hey,
Ignore me.
so yeah, I wanted to storm with Witherbloom, but watching Ryan go through his list, watching other people try to build Witherbloom, like I realized that a stormy
Yeah.
type of deck wouldn't be possible. So, but I did want to focus on all spells.
Yeah,
So,
and to be clear too, it is possible to storm in Witherbloom Apprentice. It's just not very good or consistent. And the big problem with that is exactly what, if any of you have all seen the Playing with Power episode that we did with Witherbloom Apprentice, the problem with trying to storm in Witherbloom Apprentice as your primary game plan is that you often are trying to then build your own storm, which means you have to cast enough spells to make a high storm count, and then you have to go off and you have to do so with protection because Magecraft is a trigger. Sorry, Storm is a trigger. So when Storm goes on the stack, you cast your Storm spell, it goes on the stack, all the, the trigger to create all the copies. Somebody can respond and they can bounce, kill something to the Witherbloom Apprentice. If it leaves, you do not get triggers for the storm, for the copies. You do not get those triggers. So it becomes very hard to like protect and do all that stuff all at the same time, is kind of what I think I observed when I saw people try it in my local meta. But yeah.
so the main goal with the with my version of the list, which I told Ryan before we came on, that the thing that I'm trying to do is crazy. When we look at it, you're going to look at it and go, "Oh my God, that is a hot piece of garbage." And I know it's about 90% built right now, but the way that I'm looking at Witherbloom from an all spells approach is in playtesting, I am able to leverage Witherbloom Apprentice for about 15 damage in a game, 79 turns. 15 damage. So I have a commander
15 damage to each player.
Correct.
So
right. So if nothing else, if I play 0 slimes, which that's not possible, but if I play 0 slimes, then I can leverage my commander to do half the damage to the table.
Yeah.
Now, when you add the slimes component to that with the trample, very key with the trample, now you're starting to meet the middle.
Yeah.
Of between those two game plans.
And we have to keep in mind, too, in every game of cPDH, there are other people at the table doing damage, right? And so, like, when we think about our game plans, like, especially when you see people doing math with, like, Larry, which is Loyal Subordinate, or, other extort spells, like, if you do 15 damage to each player, there's a really good chance that, like, 1 to 2 of them are dead. You didn't have to do all of it, right? And I think that there's even an argument that if you're doing too much damage to everybody, you're going to get kicked out of the game really quickly. So it's not about doing necessarily the most, right? We just need to do enough to kind of meet people halfway against the real problem card, the real problem player, right? If there is a person presenting as a problem, which every game has kind of a pseudo arch enemy to it. That tendency just tends to be the case.
And this is going to be really fun because I think I do well since Ryan took over full time and it became his baby. I think this will be the second time that and our differences in perspective of how we do deck building really start to show. So Ryan talks about like applying some pressure but not too much, and then kind of leaning back and allowing some of the table to recuperate that. So the big difference, he's already thinking it right now, when I'm about to say it. Like, I'm the opposite. I'm like, okay, apply some damage, and then let's lean into it. Let's push the gas.
Well, and we can.
You guys are going to get some, guys are going to get some real good perspectives.
Absolutely.
Between the two of us.
Well, and the cool thing with this too, and I think this is like something I've seen. Like, I actually had a conversation, in Discord yesterday with some people that were talking about like life gain not being important, and this is a really, really good way to debunk that. Okay, life gain in this format is exceptionally important and exceptionally good, especially when you're playing a mid-range deck. But like, even an aggro deck, like the ability to punch without fear of getting killed in return, or the ability to survive or buy time if you're a combo deck, or if you're a mid-range deck, be able to like grind a little bit of life over the total. What that means in this deck to me is that we play our slimes out and we don't really need to make bad blocks. We only play our creatures out and we swing. Right? Like, we don't need to care whether we're going to get punched back or not, because we're going to be gaining somewhere on the order of 10 life in the turn. And this is the most exciting part of this, okay? Because I think this is going to be something that y'all are going to see is really similar between Clay's list and mine. And that is this. And this is probably, I think, the part of it that, like, when we were in the stream and you were chatting with me, I was like, ooh, this is so exciting. There's no reason this deck cannot still Storm. There's no reason why you still can't play Reaping the Grave. Reaping the Graves might be iffy because you have to have a creature in your graveyard. But Weather the Storm, Sprouting Vines, Sprout Swarm type card. Sprout Swarm is kind of an honorary Storm card because you get a lot of triggers off of it. You can use your creatures. You can play your creatures out and then make lots of creatures. But there's no reason that if your opponents go for a combo, right, and there's a big stack war, maybe you've got 3 mana and a Weathering the Storm, right? And then right at the end of the stack, you go, Ghastly Demise, and you end the stack right there, and you finish their combo, and then end of turn, you go Weather the Storm for 9? That's huge reach. Not only are you dealing so much damage to the table, but also you are going to gain an absurd amount of life, and it's going to be very hard to actually kill you on the backswing, not to mention that these slimes get absolutely massive. The last game I played with slimes, I had 52 power in play. Now, that was like a Simic deck dedicated to putting like, a lot of big slimes into play. And this is going to be a little bit less so in that way. But I'm really excited for that double game plan, right? Like, we're going to have really cheap interaction. We're going to have big threats. And we're going to have reach with Witherbloom Apprentice. And you know what? It's going to be really hard to justify killing Witherbloom Apprentice when you've got a 7/7 trample breathing down your neck. Witherbloom Apprentice will probably not die except for on accident. And Witherbloom Apprentice is edict fodder. I will sack my Witherbloom Apprentice so that I don't lose a slime 9 out of 10 times.
Which is funny because 2 years ago you wouldn't have dreamed of wanting to do that. You wanted to protect your Witherbloom at all costs. Now it's like, okay, well I'll just throw this out there and
it's 2 mana.
Making a game plan. Yeah, it's 2 mana.
It's 2 mana. It did some damage. Like, you can also think about Witherbloom Apprentice. If we play it on turn 2, like, and we play a spell, we're kind of like, it's kind of like you could look at it as the slimes having haste, or you can look at it Witherbloom having unblockable and vigilance. Right? Does that make sense to y'all? Like these triggered drain effects are like having unblockable, a kind of lifelink, and vigilance, because they don't need to tap to attack. Let's catch up on a little bit of the stream conversation here. I'm really glad to see everybody super engaged. I just wanted to kind of get those thoughts out there and talk about Clay's thoughts as well. So Erosium says, fogs are very powerful in Witherbloom for that exact reason. I'm trying to figure the same thing out in Quandrix Apprentice. Quandrix Apprentice, for those of you interested, is kind of like Witherbloom Apprentice, but he's in Simic. And it's a Simic two mana card that says every time you cast a copy or an instant or a sorcery, you're going to look at the top 3 and you're going to get a land into your hand, and the rest go to your bottom. I will say, if that said goes into your graveyard, there would be zero question about what the best commander for slimes would be, in my opinion. Like 1 mana, mill, 2 mana, Quandrix Apprentice, turn 3, and you just start like milling these things into your graveyard. Unfortunately, it doesn't do that. It puts it on your bottom, and secondarily, lands don't really, like getting more lands doesn't really help slimes a lot. Getting more lands just gets you to the point where maybe you can double slime, but in my experience, I rarely double slime. It's very, very hard to double slime. So having 6 mana, right? It's hard.
Bingo.
It's hard. You don't need extra mana. Right? And so Quandrix Apprentice is a fine card, but I want to one other thing. Quandrix Apprentice is at 2 mana. 2 mana is a very important part of the curve. In Simic and in Golgari, 2 mana is the vast majority of your mill spells. And you can't like you're basically saying I'm going to take turn 2 off to get a land off of my next slime instead of making my slime a 6/6. It doesn't square up in my mind, right? So just wanted to point that out. Dave says, with your new Witherbloom Apprentice, I'm really curious. I just want to point out this was Clay's idea. You know, this is good stuff here. I just get to the good fortune of him coming on our show here. I'm really curious to the degree that y'all shave Bloom's massive interaction to build a slime army, and that's a good question. I think that one of the problems you run into with slime decks is that it's harder to run a lot of interaction because you need to run approximately like 30 or more slimes, I think is about the number. You could probably go as low as 25, but like.
So what's interesting about that, and we'll talk about this, I'm sitting at 30 slimes right now, and I think I might have 2, maybe 3 too many.
I think you can get, in my testing, in Simic, which is like, in Simic you want to run like, in Simic, you don't even need to run as many because in Simic you have better card selection, you have better draw. Yeah. But I think as we get away from Simic, we need to actually have more slimes so that we're more consistent with hitting them. But it's going to depend. Yeah. And traditionally, like in the Simic decks, I have like 10 pieces of interaction, which to me does not feel like very much. But like, think about it this way. All we care about is not dying to combo. So counter spells are great for that. And also maybe protecting our slimes occasionally, right? In Simic. In black, it's going to be a little bit different. We're only going to get mainly removal. In green, we'll probably play some protection as well. Dave says, I was playing around with this idea today, and I got up to 24 slime slots. I think we can get to, I think 30 is probably the sweet spot, but we can kind of play around with that and see. We'll explore that. Erosium says, life gain is a counterspell to pingers. Yeah, that's another thing, right, Clay? I mean, like, this is a pingers meta. I think a lot of people have discovered that it's very efficient to have a creature that unblockably, with no mana, hits everybody at once. And this is why...
And the benefit of Witherbloom, contrary to the other pingers out there on the market, as it were, it gains you the life. The other ones just deal the damage.
This is huge. And I think that we can't forget how important that is. Like, when I'm playing TPI, my greatest fear is that kind of damage, right? That kind of damage that drains because it's shutting off my pinger. Like, Erosium said it really well. Life gain on a pinger is a counter spell to the pinger. You're turning that pinger off just by having your creature that drains, right? And that's a really good way to put it. It's fabulous. And you don't even need to kill it. And you know what the beautiful thing is? It still pings everyone else. And you're pinging them, which means that they can't really stop you from doing your thing, but everyone else is getting double pinged, right? Like it's very, very good. So, and then Buddy, holy shit, we got a lot of comments. This is great. Buddy says it's certainly valuable, but other combo and Voltron decks have little concern to your life total. I gave up reading because of basically all the creatures other than Crypt Rats. You kept sprouting and weathering the storm. I think that's good. I think that a lot of the green and black mill stuff is on creatures. And so I'm actually thinking that Reaping the Graves is still going to be good. I think we will have creatures. We'll mill them. We will mill those mill creatures into the graveyard, and we'll probably have them there. In fact, I would argue that we're going to have a lot more creatures in this deck than Witherbloom ever did before. And we were still running Reaping the Graves.
I'm still on the train of, spells matter. So
we'll see. Mine has Reaping the Graves in it, but we'll look at the differences, right?
Yeah, the academic, I want you guys out there to understand the academic nature of what Ryan and I do with these kind of things, because it happens every single time. His list will look completely different than mine, and it's based off his perspective on the game, his particular play style, which we've already determined is not at the same... I don't want to say at the same rate, because that just makes it sound... We just approach... Like, I'm more of a lean forward kind of guy.
I would lean forward with this deck too, to be honest. So I don't think there's actually as many differences here as you might think.
Generally speaking.
Generally speaking, we definitely we do things somewhat differently, or think about things somewhat differently. I think in this deck though, I feel totally comfortable leaning forward because we have life gain in our command zone, and it's okay if we get punched.
So would you play 28 lands?
No. But I could see,
just you wait, buddy.
But I mean, if you're so one way to look at it, and actually a couple days ago, I was talking to somebody and they asked me, should I put Abundant Harvest in my deck? And at first I was like, no, because I just felt like it was like eating up another slot. And then I thought, wait, Abundant Harvest is just Ash Barrens. And sometimes it does more. So I said, just cut a land. Cut a land and play Abundant Harvest. And so if we're looking at it that way with your deck, where you're playing ramp instead of lands, then maybe that does make sense. Because then the ramp off the top is another trigger for Witherbloom Apprentice, as opposed to a land, which is not.
So let's capture that in a bottle like right now.
Yeah.
So when you see what I did with my list, the reason why I'm at 26 or 28 lands is because I was thinking about it exactly that way.
Yeah.
So if I have a forest and a one mana ramp.
Yep.
Spell,
or like a land finder, right? Like Abundant Harvest.
To my hand. See, now I'm creating this velocity, and I'm also triggering Witherbloom, and I'm also deck thinning, and that was the perspective that I used when I put my list together.
And deck thinning in Witherbloom Apprentice. Now, I just want to clarify. Deck thinning is very rarely a reason to make choices in your deck, okay? I just want to make that super clear. Deck thinning is statistically irrelevant in like 95 or more % of cases. This is different. Witherbloom Apprentice drew a lot of cards, and it had a lot of ramp that shuffled and searched for lands. And you would get to a point in the game where you're like, I have like 2 basics left in my deck, and every time I draw off Monarch, right? Like that improved the quality of my draw by maybe 25 or even 30%, right? So in this case, I think that's a great idea. And the question is just going to be, where do these spells sit on the line? Like, for example, Search for Tomorrow is going to be a great card in this deck. You know, turn 1, suspend Search from Tomorrow. Turn 2, Witherbloom Apprentice. Turn 3, Search from Tomorrow triggers, puts a land into play, triggers Witherbloom Apprentice, and then we cast our Slime, holding up maybe like a Ghastly Demise or a protection spell or something like that, or Abundant Harvest, right? And I'm going to try and keep up with y'all's comments here. It's really great. So
I didn't realize that I was so popular.
Yeah, of course, man. I mean, you're the GOAT. This is all to be expected here. Okay, and then Dave mentioned, of course, that it feels like if Witherbloom dies, then you just win with Slimes. Yeah, and I think that's absolutely right. Like Witherbloom, if it dies, it'll be because somebody did like a Pestilence, a Crypt Rats, or an accident. It'll be accidental.
It's two game plans that are intentionally made to mesh.
Yes, and they're going to overlap really well. But if one goes and not the other, like if somebody targets my Witherbloom Apprentice, I'm going to be quite happy. I'm going to be quite happy. It basically was like a benevolent bodyguard to my Slime, is a way to look at it, right? Buddy mentions, is Vicious Rumors in the list? Not in mine, but it might be in Clay. We'll look at that one. It's a mill 1, discard 1, everybody takes 1. It might be good, yeah. The main thing is that 1 mana mill spells, when you get into Golgari, become really, really important, because you don't get a lot of them. Like in Simic, you have a ton. You have like looting spells, you have like otherworldly gaze, you have like careful study, you have, all these like cheap 1 mana, like, mental note, thought scour type stuff.
I had to relook up Vicious Rumors. The reason why it's not in the list is because it says each opponent
doesn't mill us.
Starts a card.
Yeah, so we probably wouldn't play that. No, we probably wouldn't play it. Although it is 1 mana, deal like 6 damage to the table, right? Like 2/2/2, but it doesn't mill us. So yeah. And then Erosium says it has multiple avenues to win, which has become more valuable in high interaction meta. Absolutely. Absolutely. With Slimes, board wipes won't really hurt. Now, board wipes have always been an important part of Witherbloom Apprentice, and we basically just like were consigned to the fact that if we cast a board wipe, it was probably going to kill like Witherbloom Apprentice too, and that was okay because we had cards like Opal Palace and we had cards like Crop Rotation to go find it, and then if Witherbloom died a lot, we could make him into like, I've had games where it was like 8/8, right? 8/8. You get your Whisper Silk Cloak down on it, and you just win games that way because you've just gained too much life to die. And so in this particular case, I don't think we actually need board wipes because our creatures are better than everyone else's. They trample. We don't need to clear the board probably. If we do play them, it would be a targeted kind of a thing, like an Arms of Hadar that like says, gut, fuck your world. Like just
Yeah,
right.
CPI, got
Yeah, yeah,
Abdel.
Abdel. It could be a lot of things, right? There's a lot of decks that suffer really badly from a -2/-2 to all your things, right? So, so I think that that's the way I would look at that. We could also play a card like Whale of the Nim, which is a 3 mana instant. It deals 1 damage to every creature and every player, or it regenerates all creatures in play, and you can entwine it for 1 more. So for 4, you could basically wipe your opponent's board in response to some sort of destruction effect on your creature, and it would regenerate your slime, right? So that would be another way to look at it. And then let's see, Dave says one other thing I find kind of chill in the new slime ideas is that y'all have is playing more of the efficient card draw, village rights. Yeah, and man, y'all are just hitting the nail on the head here. I'm glad that you see it the way that we do, because Witherbloom Apprentice did occasionally play, like in the past, I did play Village Rites and Corrupted Conviction, but what I realized is that it was only ever, these cards were only ever drawing me cards when people were killing Witherbloom Apprentice, and Witherbloom Apprentice is not a high priority target. It is not a creature that people should be going out of their way to kill, because it's rather slow. Right, it wants to slow the game down. It's applying symmetrical pressure to the table. It's not pinning one person and hammering them. And so it felt bad. It felt like a card that we wanted to have in the deck, but that we couldn't because of the nature of the lack of creatures in the deck. Right, and so now we can, because people will kill the slimes. They will kill them, and then we will draw cards. Right, it's a guarantee. And then Fly Jump says the first slime is a decent 2/2 trample that drains the table for 3. Yeah, right. Like first slime's probably not going to be that big, but they will grow in size. And then the last question here, and then we're going to get moving here, is this deck, Marauding Blight Priest really does work? That's a really good point. A lot of people really liked Marauding Blight Priest and Epicure of Blood. These are 2 cards that basically have the text, whenever you gain life, everybody loses 1 life. So it's kind of like a Dina Soul Steeper just in your deck. And I didn't play these cards in the past, namely because A, they didn't really block. They really couldn't attack all that great. Epicure of Blood could, because it was a 4/4, so I tended to prefer Epicure over the other one, because a 4/4 black creature doesn't die to very much. And it didn't die to my sweepers, but Marauding Blight Priest did. And because the moment I got those out in play, everybody would try and kill me, right? This deck, I think we probably do want them. I think we probably do, but that's just a guess. I don't know. So, without further ado, Clay, let's transition into your list first before looking at mine. Do you have yours public?
Well, you've got it on. Okay, so
let me go to explore and then search, and we'll find it here.
I sent you the link in but you can't switch in Discord, can you?
Yeah, I can't switch in here, so let's just look it up here. So is it just called Wither? We'll go to advanced.
WA Slimes.
Okay, and then WA Slimes.
Yep, and I just updated it here in the last seconds.
Okay, great. So there we go. Awesome. So here we go. Let's give that a like. And we're going to drop this link here in the chat for those of you that want to watch along on your own. You're welcome to do that, although you'll see us do it here, so you don't need to do that. But let's take a look at the list here, and then Clay, do you want to maybe take us through kind of your? Yeah. I want you to walk us through this because I didn't build this deck, so.
So here, as of late, because I'm more, and so some caveats, because I'm a more proactive player, which is generally speaking, we established that, and as of late, I've been on this kick for mid-range experimentation, because we've had kind of a mold. If 2023 was a certain mold of mid-range, I'm trying to deviate from that intentionally. So what does that intentional shift look like? And quintessentially, actually, the most important thing that you can do is that you can scroll down to the curve.
Yep. It ends at 3.
So basically, it ends at 3.
Yep.
And I want you to take note that the 1 and 2 slot together cumulatively add up to more than the 3 slot.
Yeah, so we have 38 38 1 and 2 drops with 32 3 drops.
And the goal of this, the premise behind this, is because I want so much acceleration, velocity with my land drops, which I do have at 28 lands. Woo! And then I want to be able to, like, the Witherbloom plan and an all spells plan, all spells plan, is to be casting something meaningfully every single turn. And you may not necessarily want to max out your mana on your turn. You might want to be able to cast, something to progress your board state, but then let the turn, progress through your opponents. And then, you want to have that availability. So a lot of this is designed. Now, this list is about 90%.
Yeah, you have 100. You do have 100 cards, but it's not settled yet.
Yeah, it's not settled in the least. So what it is trying to do is, number one, I want to land Witherbloom on turn 2. So that's mandatory in my book. Number 2 is I want to make sure that at least the first 6 or 7 turns I'm making my land drops. So there's this odd balance between the 1 mana accelerants, mana accelerants. We'll just call them that. One that I could add that I had in here, but I don't, is crop rotation. But we can cover that later. But then also, I want to be able to, like you said, drop a slime. Once I hit a certain threshold, slime, like at least every turn, slime, right? And they might start out as a 2/2, 3/3, whatever it is.
Probably a 2/2 or a 3/3 in most cases, yeah. Because the 1 mana mill is really yeah.
The next turn it's going to be a 4/4. The next turn it's going to be a 5/5. The next turn it's 6/6. And there's some ways. For example, I'm looking at you, Thirsting Roots. There are some ways to kind of do one or the other.
Thirsting Roots is a staple, should be a staple in every single slime deck. And what you can do is just cut a land, and it's an evolve. Look at this and say, this is an Ash Barrens. It's going to find me my basic for 1 mana, and it's better than Ash Barrens because later on you can proliferate instead if you don't need lands anymore, which is fabulous. And I would say that one is super premium alongside with. It looks like Abundant Harvest is one that you could probably get in here too, because it's the same concept, except that it'll find you a slime or removal.
Yep.
Right. So that one could probably go into.
Yeah. So it's a matter of it's a matter of tweaking the list. I started out with 14 pieces of removal because I'm really interested in having at least 1 piece of removal in hand between turns 1 through 4.
Yes, and that math is really important. The math there of cards, and I actually talked to was it Brody that you work with so closely at cpedh.guide?
Oh, Bodarn.
Bodarn. Yep. I was just trying to pull that name out of my hat there. So yeah, Bodarn. I was talking with him about some math stuff, some data science things, and Bodarn, of course, if you watch this later on and you want to correct me on this or provide extra depth or detail, feel free to do so in the comments afterwards. But the impression that he left me with was that for you to have a card or a kind of card, let's put it that way, a kind of card consistently on turn by your 10th card, so turn 3, you need to have approximately 11 of them in your deck. And so when you're looking at what Clay has done here, he's saying, I want a form of particularly creature removal in my hand by turn 3. And actually it's and then what you can do is you can extrapolate that and say, if you have 11, you are likely to see 2 in the course of a game. That's kind of what that number tells you, right? You're likely to see about 2 in the course of a game. 14, you're starting to look at 2.5. You will hit 2, but you're probably going to hit maybe 1 more. And that doesn't include draw. We're just talking about natural draws off the top. When you start to add draw, you'll hit more.
And this works out well because if the initial premise, if the initial hypothesis was, I want to be able to use my mana efficiently. Now, granted, there are 2-mana removal spells that do a better job than, say, Disfigure or
Yeah.
something to
Or
that
Lash of
effect.
Malice, which is like a better version of Disfigure in this deck.
So yeah, because you're pumping your slimes for
You
that
don't
extra
care if they
trample
lose
damage.
toughness.
Yeah. So it's beautiful. But yeah, like things like Disfigure, or maybe even like Ghastly Demise.
This is Lightning
Which
Bolt in this deck.
yeah.
1
So
damage
I mean,
ping, 2 power.
yeah. So it's one of those deals that you're making some compromises based on the type of. Well,
Yep, you are.
I am making some
But
compromises.
our lists are actually not that far apart. You are lower on the land count, but when we talked about before, you were saying I really want to have super inexpensive removal, and I actually like one of the evolutions I've had as a player, as the meta has evolved and as a deck builder, is that I am increasingly very focused on high action economy. And for those of you that play D&D, you're going to be familiar with this concept, but it's the idea that being able to do more things in your given turn is better than not doing as many things. And so what that means is playing cheaper spells. Now, not always, right? We want our spells to still accomplish the goal that we want them to do, right? If we have a kill spell, ideally it's lethal. However, the question is always going to be, what is your job and what is it that you struggle with? Because we're in Golgari, because our creatures are so big and because our commander gains life, our problem is probably not the aggro player. Our problem is probably the combo player, right? So a -2/-2 from a Disfigure is actually really effective at killing most combo creatures. Lash of Malice, +2/-1 is basically like an instant speed immolation, right? Or Ghastly Demise, because we're filling our graveyard up, is phenomenal. Snuff Out, of course. I would be playing Spinning Darkness in this list too, because it's free. And then Vendetta being a great example. We also have like Mutant's Prey here, which is great. This is just a 1-mana it's a 1-mana terminate basically. And then Prey Upon being sorcery speed, but still like something you can do. And that's going to allow us to go like, turn 4, play a slime, and then do something, right?
The Mutant's Prey is really
it's great
because it's the +1/+1 counters that come in on the
it's always on. It's always on.
It's always on.
Yeah.
So things like to justify. So Pick Your Poison. It's a new removal spell. So
sometimes it is.
Whatever Slimes deck you're playing, you're not a turbo list.
Yeah.
So if we can accept the fact that a Slimes deck does not equal a turbo list,
they're mid-range decks. Slimes, or combo.
Yeah.
Or combo. If you're playing Hermit Druid or
right.
Gameskeeper.
So if we look at it from the perspective of our main game plan, not to say that Witherbloom's not doing stuff. You can refresh that. I did. Abundant Harvest. Sweet. Not to say that Witherbloom can't do work, but our main game plan, he's kind of like a star opener.
Yeah. He's a turn 2 play that's going to push damage and gain you life, right?
So our main game plan is going to be Slimes, and Slimes is going to be slow. So if we accept the fact that that's the case, then we look at cards like Pick Your Poison and those bastards who like to put out that turn 2 Malcolm. So Pick Your Poison says each opponent sacrifices a creature with flying. For 1 mana, get out of here.
Yeah.
Or Weavers is prominent. Gretchen is prominent.
Nurok Stealth Suit goes away to this, right?
Yes.
Right?
So
and they're not going to have any other artifacts out. This will be the only one.
Yeah. So for 1 mana in that early game, you're basically taking care of a problem to you, not maybe to the table, but a problem to you. You are picking the mode that's relevant to that.
And this is what's really different about Simic and Golgari. And I tend to think that Simic is like, of the, if we're just talking about like as a whole, Simic feels like the best color for slimes. That doesn't mean that the best slime decks are going to be Simic, right? It just means that if you're trying to maximize slimes, Simic is going to take you a long ways because you have literally like 2-mana mill 7s. like crazy power from that, right? You could go super deep and there's a lot of really great synergy there. However, this is another really great slime game plan that we have here. And our approach to interaction is going to be different. When you're playing Simic, you want counter spells. Because why would you play removal? Our creatures are bigger than everything else. You just want to protect your game plan and not die to combo. So we play counter spells. And that's like, I would say generally better than what we get in black, which is killing things, right? But this deck operates on a slightly different axis. We have multiple different angles here that we can approach this from. We have the Storm plan, which is really explosive, and that's kind of like having bigger slimes in a sense, right? We have like a big, like, fuck you kind of a thing that we can do at a certain point of the game. Bulk Box says CMC efficiency is key for instants and sorceries and allow you to do more on your turns. And fundamentally, having a lot of these cheap instants and sorceries makes two cards in particular that are very important to this deck better. And that is Ghastly Demise, which counts the number of cards in your graveyard. This card is really, really good in plunder decks. It's also very good here because we have a lot of cheap stuff. So Ghastly Demise is going to be on early and often. The other one, and I think this probably should be here, is Spinning Darkness. Spinning Darkness is a free lightning helix that doesn't hit black creatures, and the ability to like tap out is really why Snuff Out is so good, right? Especially
it was the lack of black that kept me off.
Yeah, what's your color balance here? Oh, so this is very interesting. You are, and this is probably most slime decks are going to be like, because the slimes are green. Right, so I think that's fair, but part of it is like, and you're going to see the difference with my list here when we go and check that out. I have a lot more black in it because I'm doing a lot more self-milling, and so this is really interesting. I really like where we're going with this. The other thing I wanted to mention, you have Funeral Rites and you have Atrocious Experiment. These are kind of like they're not amazing cards. I would say like 3 mana draw 2, not at instant speed. 3 mana draw 2 for a long time was perfectly fine in black, but it had to be at instant speed, or it had to give you like a blood token, like what was it?
Yeah, no.
3 mana, sorcery speed, draw 2 cards, lose 2 life, make a blood token. Anyways, you guys know the card. That was fine. Read the Bones, scry 2.
Many cards anymore.
I know, right? But like Blood Pact, for example, was one that was good. Instant speed, draw 2, or succumb to temptation. And these are worse than that, except that they mill us for 2. So I really like how these do double duty. I think Winding Way is very, very good in this deck as well.
So your compromise on the Atrocious Experiment or Funeral Rites, if you're not playing them in your list, is that you're playing probably a creature that does more?
Yeah.
So my trade-off is I wanted to maintain the spells, the Oops All spells.
I have these cards, just to be clear. I'm playing both of these in this one. Yeah. So, pointed discussion. There it is, Rosium. Thank you. But there's a couple of like really, really big gems when you're building around slimes that are going to be in all your decks because they're all green. Mulch is crazy. Mulch can... I've had Mulch get me like 2 lands. So like a 2 mana, mill 2... put a slime in the graveyard and do the math on it, okay? Like, here's the analytical approach that I'm going to bring to this as well, which is that when we mill 4, how many slimes do we have in our deck, and how many slimes are in the top 4 cards of our library? With 30 slimes, it's approximately 1 1/4, 1 1/3. It's about 1 1/3. So that means mill 4 is kind of like the break. Mill 3 is the break point. You mill 3, you're going to put 1 slime in on average, right? Mill 4, you're going to put 1, maybe 2, right? And so mill 4 is great. Another one being Grapple with the Past, instant speed, mill 2, and it gets you a card. So what you want to be looking for, I think, just as a general principle in slime decks, is mill spells that get you something in return. They don't just mill, right? Because milling on its own is card disadvantage that makes your slimes better, but we need to be able to keep card parity. So cards like Grapple with the Past say you get a creature or a land back from your graveyard. Doesn't need to be the one you milled, which is really big. You can get special things back with this, like Tranquil Thicket or Barrenmoor, right? And then you have like Grizzly Salvage, mill 5 for 2 at instant speed, get a creature or a land, great. Drown in Filth is also really good. You're just going to mill things and you're going to kill something. And then we've got like your Roots of Wisdom is a really interesting addition to this deck. And you kind of have to read the card very carefully. But mill 3, return a land card or an elf card from your graveyard to your hand. It didn't need to be milled there this way, right? If it says this way, it can only be those ones. If you can't get one of those 2 back, draw a card.
Draw a card
So if you mill 3,
in green.
this is 2 mana, mill 3, draw a card, or get a land back. And the lands are really, really helpful ultimately. They're not super crucial, but they are helpful. Winding Way is never going to hit creatures in this deck, so you just do land. You get a bunch of lands for it. In my deck, it is actually going to hit stuff. And then we've got Ransack the Lab, which is a black strategic planning. Great, right? Yeah, this is awesome. You like look at the top 2. You've got slime, some other random shit. You take a slime, put the other one in. It's great. So
let's talk about Over the Edge.
Over the Edge is another one I noticed here that I was rather curious to hear your thoughts on.
So Over the Edge. So once again, what we're worried about is those fast. So like a Malcolm player might put out a what's that Rune Stalactite on turn 1, right? And they're trying to get a timely Malcolm out with a pirate. Yeah, I'm doing. I got my tiger milk tea.
Yeah, I'm a Kimbo over here, man. We got 2 of them. Actually, we got 3. We got coffee as well.
So Over the Edge allows me the opportunity to, like a Gretchen player, right? A Gretchen player will keep a hand by and large with one of 2 things. They'll keep with a land untapper or an aura.
Or if they just have Freed from the Real. I've seen Gretchen players be like, oh, I've got Freed from the Real and something else. And they'll go, and then they don't have any auras on their things, so, yeah.
So the nice thing about that is in the early game, I have the opportunity of, like, really taking care of some of those problem permanents that might be on the battlefield. But in the late game, it explores twice.
Yep.
Which, at the end of the day, like, that part that it says, or put it into your graveyard.
Yeah,
so
it's a mill 2.
This is a mill 2 for 2. That's modal.
Yeah, I actually kind of like that. I didn't like it at first because Explore usually is with the purpose of getting lands, and you actually have a very land-light deck. But the alternate mode on that is mill 1, or put a slime on top, right, and don't mill it.
Yeah.
Right, like mill 1, put something in the graveyard, mill another one, and you're like, oh, there's a slime. That's what I needed, right? So I actually think Over the Edge probably wants to be in my deck too, And really, like, the interesting thing about the removal here is that if, again, we're thinking that combo is kind of like our concern because we can beat all the other decks, right? We can beat the other creature-based decks.
Slow. Yeah. Because we're slow.
It's not like, I think that in my experience so far, slimes very much fit into, if you're not, well, let me clarify. If you are doing combo stuff with slimes, this is a completely different conversation and disregard some of what I'm saying, okay? And what I mean by that is Hermit Druid and Gamekeeper. The Gamekeeper Battlefield Scrounger. That's the combo stuff, right? But if you're doing what we're doing here, if you're doing slimes, it's going to be kind of a proactive mid-range deck. What I mean by that is that you're not going to be winning on like turn 5. You're going to be winning on between turn 8 and turn 10. Right, and part of the reason that you often will win these matchups against other people doing creature-based strategies is because, as was pointed out early, our slimes only get bigger. The more time we have in the game, the more our Witherbloom Apprentice goes to work, and the bigger our slimes get. Right, so we have some late game inevitability that's really strong, and like make no mistake, they're going to get big.
Yeah. we don't care about grinding in that late game. That's where we want to be at. We just don't want to lose in that early game.
Right, we're not concerned about our ability to win a late game scenario. I think that's a big part of it. We're worried about dying to Malcolm, Gretchen, like Abdel even is like a little bit slower, and man, we run train on Abdel. Like our trampling slimes are like, dude. And you know what?
Well, also, the biggest weakness. So the biggest weakness of Abdel is now you're forcing them to have 2 flickers on hand.
Yes.
Because basically, what you're doing is you're targeting Abdel with the triggers on the stack, and then they get nothing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So you force them to have 2,
yep.
And if you're being the responsible player and having your piece of removal, then you're
somebody else will too.
Is being responsible
or a counterspell.
Well.
Yeah. And what we mean by that, for those of you who maybe are less familiar with the format, Abdel has a trigger that when it comes into play, it gets the ability to pick up a whole bunch of stuff. And when you do, you're going to get a token for every single one of them. And the tokens are really important because it buys the Abdel player time, right? The blockers are really important to their strategy. And if you deny them the blockers, they die very, very quickly. Like if you watch a game where an Abdel player gets Abdel sort of like stopped, twice, it doesn't usually go very well for them. And the way you can do that is when the trigger goes on the stack, you kill it in response. And if you kill it in response, they don't get any of the tokens, and they don't get any of the flickers.
They have to have another flicker.
Yeah, so if they play Abdel, it resolves, trigger on the stack, you go to kill it, and then they flicker it, then they will get to do one flicker. Basically when it comes back in. So just to clarify that.
But they're wasting.
They are wasting, yeah. It's wasting one of the flickers. So there were a couple of comments. One, Zach says Titanic Brawl is a 1-mana fight. He's totally right. Titanic Brawl would be another good card you could consider for this deck. Maybe even replacing something like Go for the Throat could be an option just to keep your removal at 1. Go for the Throat's like one of the best removal spells in the whole format. But if you really are, or maybe Smell Fear, because I think Smell Fear's Proliferate maybe isn't... It's not instant speed, basically, is what I'm saying. And Titanic Brawl is. Titanic Brawl is 2 mana. Its cost is reduced by 1, I believe, and it's a fight. Mm-hmm. And then the other card here that is being pointed out as well, and I have this in my list too, is Ram Through. And Ram Through is fucking awesome in this deck because they have Trample.
Yeah, it's in my considering.
I think I would. I would pull Go for the Throat for Ram Through because it has that boom headshot. Yeah, you guys know I'm a black player. I'm all about it. Go for the Throat never doesn't make it into any of my black decks. Okay, this might be the exception for Clay's list in particular because he's really focusing on getting his curve low. The upside of Ram Through going like 2 mana. Kill your combo creature, hit you for 7 is crazy, right? Like it would be like having a Terminate that said like do 6 damage also. Like, right?
Yeah. So this is the crux. So Go for the Throat on turn 2. Like for example, I'm always going to try to cast my Witherbloom on turn 2.
Yep.
But if I notice that someone's like, oh, turn 1, Simian Spirit Guide, Lotus Petal,
Malcolm, different story.
Yeah, then I'm not going to cast that. I'm going to cast now in that circumstance.
Yes,
Ram Through does
because not dying there is more important than getting your engine online. When you're playing a deck like this, that is actually pretty resilient. Right. Mm-hmm. And there's a couple of other cards that I'm going to talk to you all about as well that I think are going to increase our reach even further, because the other thing that I've been learning isn't just about the efficiency of our interaction. And that's really important, right? Like that our interaction allow us to deploy our game plan while holding it up is super important. It's why like Galvanic Blast, Lightning Bolt, Outnumber, these sorts of Snuff Out, Spinning Darkness type cards are just so important. The other thing that I've been playing more of in my mid-range decks, and this is one of them, right, is some cards that just kind of end the game for a player, okay? And there's a couple of them in black that we get that are really good. So if you look at my TPI list, I actually do have Mob Justice in it now, right? Because Mob Justice is sometimes like a 2-mana deal 14 to somebody's head, and they just die. Right, like, or somebody goes to like cast Pestilence, and you're like, yeah, Pestilence on the stack, massive raid, counter that spell because your spell can't resolve if you're dead, right? Like, you need those sorts of like reach things that can take a target player and just end them. Because in mid range, when we want to get to a dominant position, sometimes there is a person who's like a really big problem for us, like a mono sweepers type deck, right? Like, I don't want to be playing TPI with Lanius Legate, for example, like where they're like, I have 6 sweepers in my deck, like, no thanks. Hard pass, not my type of, not the game I want to play. So you're going to see in my list as we transition over to it, unless you have anything else you want to say about this one here.
No. I think I pretty much covered.
Let's do a compare. This is the best way to do it here. So we're going to go to, it's going to be at the bottom because it's W, Witherbloom Apprentice Slimes. Okay. And actually, let's do this here. Let's go, actually, what we'll do is, let's go back here, and I'm going to copy this URL. how do we want to do this here? Because I want to look at my deck in its complete entirety. So I'll bookmark yours under these here, and then we'll come back to it. So my decks in progress. Oh, we've got it right here. There we go. Okay, so pretty different deck, but I'm going to be taking some pointers from what you've got here, and we're going to make some changes right away to it that I think are really good additions. And then there's some things in mind that I think you ought to consider as well that we can kind of look at. Now, you had 58 instants and sorceries in the deck.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
and I'm at 113 cards, so we're not done here yet. But I have, I'm probably going to be just shy of yours a little bit, right? Because I do have a certain number of creatures in the deck. Removal-wise, you're going to see a really close similarity. And actually, before we go on here, I just wanted to address a couple of questions. Zach mentioned Titanic Brawl. We talked about that. Dave mentioned, is Corpse Churn that useful? I don't like Corpse Churn in Clay's deck, but I do like it in mine, because I actually do have some creatures in there that I can get. It's just a mill 3, right? And then Dave says, also curious about what y'all think about rituals, Cabal Ritual with a big graveyard, or even Dark Ritual.
If the slimes had a black CMC,
yeah, it's a little awkward, right? Like, because you could go, like, what curve does it enable us to do? Because, for example, Loyal Subordinate plays Dark Ritual because you can turn 1 Loyal Subordinate. That's the only reason why, right? In this deck, if we went turn 1 Swamp Dark Ritual, what are we doing with that mana? If we went turn 2 Witherbloom Apprentice, but instead we went Dark Ritual Witherbloom Apprentice, then we have 2 black. What are we doing with it? Maybe we're using a mill spell, right? But like, I think in general, it's going to feel kind of awkward, but it could be good.
As we looked at the curve of my list, I'm heavily skewed green.
Yeah, so that's the other thing, is it's not making the mana you need, right? And neither is Cabal Ritual.
Is your list private?
It is. Now it's not. There we go. Sweet. Yeah, I keep them unlisted until the show, so that folks don't ruin the surprise for themselves. I know that they would. I know you would. I see you out there, folks. And then
so I'm gonna get my compare going.
Tragic. And then we're gonna make changes. Actually, we're gonna make a lot of changes to this, but let's go through the list really quick first. So draw spells. You're gonna see the same thing here, although Tranquil Thicket needs to be in here as well for draw. We've got our lands that can draw cards, which are going to be really good here because we have a lot of ways to get lands back from the graveyard. So kind of how do we draw cards? Well, we're going to how do we turn a card like Circle of the Land Druid into a draw spell? When it dies, it's going to get lands back from our graveyard to your hand, and if we don't need lands anymore, then we pick up a card like a Tranquil Thicket or a Barrenmoor, and then we cycle it to get something different, right? And then that land is in there for another card that picks up a land from the graveyard. We have Seed of Hope, and part of the reason that I'm playing this is a 1-mana mill 2, which doesn't really hit that 1-mana mill, or that mill 3 sort of minimum, but it's 1 mana, right? And this is going to return a permanent from our graveyard to our hand only if it's a permanent that was milled this way. So it is a little bit awkward in that, like, you're not always going to hit a land with this or a creature. But it is a mill 2 for 1 mana. There's a little bit of life gain, not really why. I am playing Corrupted Conviction and Village Rites because I am quite confident, having played slimes now, that our slimes will die. They will get killed. In fact, the way that it has worked for me is that my first 3 slimes are going to die, and then the other ones are lethal. That's the way to look at it, right? Like, people get spooked. Like, your slimes are very large. They're the biggest creatures in cPDH. There's nothing bigger than a slime in a slime deck. They're going to be huge. And then Branchwood Plow. This is one of the big decks, big differences with your list here, Clay, is that we have cards like Branchwood Prowler, which are basically milling, getting us lands, and being a body that can either be sacrificed, blocked, or when we mill over our cards and then we have a card like Corpse Churn, then we also get that creature back, and it doesn't really affect our game plan at all. Commune with the Gods is here too, so what you can see is that my deck has a lot more self-mill. I have 20 slots allocated to self-mill in this deck. And so in some ways, this deck is a slower version of what you've got, Clay, with more like card advantage and bigger slimes in it, but our interactive suite is very, very similar, which is a good sign. I've got Ram Through, Drown in Filth, Vendetta, Tragic Slip. Did you have Tragic Slip in yours?
I did not.
Okay, this one might not be correct, and I think we're going to just cut this right away here because we don't have consistent ways of like making things die.
Right.
Lash of Malice, Premium, Ghastly Demise, Disfigure, Defile. I think
So
Defile. You don't have
I don't
Defile.
have Defile. Yeah, because I'm leaning more green.
You are, but here's the thing to consider: you're playing Disfigure. Defile is almost always Disfigure. Oh, we lost Clay. We lost Clay. Where'd he go? All right,
Am I
chat. Yep, you're here. We can't see you though. Refresh your OBS perhaps. Or there we go. Yep, we got you back. And he's back. Couldn't keep him down.
Weird.
And then looks like you lost a little bit of there we go. Nice, nice. There it is. We're all good to go. You're set.
I have no idea what happened.
Yeah, maybe it was the software we're using, but either way, we got you back, so that's good.
Oh, it's an exact hour. Maybe it has a timer.
Maybe it has a timer. No, I don't think it does. It's intended for like corporate
I'm just
usages,
being
but
silly.
yeah.
I'm just being silly.
The point I was making though is that Defile I think should be in your deck if you need a cheaper removal spell because it's going to be -2. Almost always -2. And at -2, there's a lot of decks where I would not want this card, right? If we were playing anything else where we weren't concerned so much about like that early interaction, you know, kind of thing and like cheap, this is almost, Defile is almost always like -4 or more.
And it'll be one of those deals that in playtesting I'm going to be watching.
Yeah.
So like I don't know if this is known or not. I know Ryan knows this. I goldfish a lot.
Yes.
Like a lot. So and I'm looking for, and I'll put out a test question like exactly like this, like is Defile a reasonable early turn option, and like we're talking about turn 2 option for the list, and in reality it'd be more like a turn 3 option because Witherbloom has to come down on turn 2. But I digress. So that as I'm goldfishing, this is the stuff that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Okay, like I'm hitting my land drops. What does that component look like?
Yeah.
You know, how consistently am I getting XYZ? And this will help me kind of like bridge the gap of whether or not I need this or another piece or what have you.
And generally speaking, the way to look at this too is that these 1-mana spells, I think the best way to look at it is that they are ways that we can kill things on turn 4. Turn 3 slime, turn 4 slime plus 1 mana to hold up, right? And that's where they really are going to thrive. And that's partially where like the removal being really cheap is going to be important. And I think at that stage of the game, Defile will probably be -2, maybe -1. It might not be. I think that the fact that it's cheap rather than the fact that it works really early is maybe what's most important about the card. But it's just a card to consider. I think I've got Prize Fight in here as well, which is really just a fight spell that's giving us a treasure token. It's fixing our mana.
Yeah.
Treasure is really good, and of course
it's in my considering.
It's a 1-mana spell, but it costs 2 mana to cast. So I would actually cut this right here for Titanic Brawl, because Titanic Brawl actually is 1 mana, right? This is the card here. So this is the same thing as Mutant's Prey, except that Mutant's Prey cannot be cast at all unless you have a +1/+1 counter on your creature. Titanic Brawl says it's costing 2 or it's costing 1. So Titanic Brawl is definitely where we want to be there.
So that for that Titanic Brawl, so the part that makes me nervous is let's work our game plan out, right? So turn 1,
something,
go get a land.
Yeah, like Abundant Harvest.
Turn 2, Witherbloom.
Yeah.
Now we're at a decision point. We're at turn 3. If we play a slime,
no interaction. Yeah.
We are tapped out.
Yeah.
So do we resolve ourselves to spend 2 mana and do a 1 mana something and another 1 mana something?
Or
and then go
a 2 mana something with a 1 mana kill spell? I think more likely than not, it depends on the pod. If we're up against a Malcolm or some sort of turbo Rogue Rack kind of thing, we're going to want to go and this is where the 2-mana mill is going to be really good, or a 2-and-1 mana mill, is that maybe our first slime in this deck comes out on turn 4 in those
Yeah.
matchups. And I think maybe
Yep.
even in my deck here, it is looking like it's a turn 4
So
first slime.
so taking that scenario, and
Hmm.
what was that card that you just had?
It was the prize fight.
So you have a 2-mana kill spell
Yep.
that has the real potential of being in your hand on a turn 3, the aforementioned turn 3,
And all we have
and
is
now we don't
Witherbloom.
have, and all we have is Witherbloom. So these are
Yeah.
the real, like, the minutia of consideration that I'm looking at. I'm not saying that
No, I see. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that these aren't great spells. They are great
We have to consider them
spells.
in context of our deck and what we're most likely to lose to. That's what's really important. And this is really where we get into like, this is part of the reason, well, this is part of the value you all as an audience get out of these streams, is that we're talking about like these really sort of advanced concepts in terms of like, yeah, that's a good card, but is it right for the deck? Is it, does it fit with the curve? Like Dark Ritual, great card. Does it go in every black deck? Fuck no. Right? You don't just play good cards, right? You play cards that are good for your deck and that match your strategy, right? And so what you're saying is like these fight spells have the weakness of being sort of mid when you only have Witherbloom Apprentice. In fact, if you have Witherbloom Apprentice in a fight spell and a Malcolm comes out, you're trading commanders. It's actually it's basically it's a bone shards, right? I pay mana to kill your thing at the cost of my thing too. So I go down 2 cards, you go down 1 card. Or if it's an early Malcolm, maybe they had to play a ritual to get it out. But
and sometimes you'd rather kill the Reckless Fireweaver instead, and Witherbloom doesn't have enough power to get you there.
yeah. So here's a couple of questions that came in. Rosium brought up Virulent Swipe. And
it's a rebound.
Yeah.
Unless they mean Virulent Wound.
No, Virulent Swipe grants +2/+0 Death Touch and Rebound. So Death Touch is really good with Trample, and it's 2 triggers for 1 mana. So this is basically like, and now there's people, and actually I've been having a long chat with, or I had a chat with Lawbert, who makes great cPDH and PDH content as well, and talking to him about these like drain creatures, right, or spells that drain, and I think like the way that I am starting to look at these cards is actually as like there's a collective life total of 90, and I only need to do part of that damage, right? I only need to get us part of the way there, right? And there's other people working on other people's life totals too, generally speaking. And so I look at a card like Virulent Swipe, and because we have Witherbloom Apprentice, this kind of reads like, if you ignore all the text, if you just say this was textless and it was just rebound, 1 mana black rebound, it would be drain 6, so lose 6, gain 2. So I look at this, and this is an 8-point life differential, right? We're taking 6 from the table, and we're gaining 2. That's 6 points different, 8 points difference, and 6 of it is proactive damage. Virulent Swipe also gives +2/+0 and Death Touch. That's a lot more than +2/+0 though, because with the Death Touch, all you have to do is allocate 1 point to the blocker. And so this is actually like, if we did the full math on it, now most of the time chump blocking doesn't really happen with the slimes. Nobody wants to lose creatures and take the damage, right? So like the Death Touch part of it, little less relevant. It is somewhat. Like if they block with an Augur of Bolus or a Philology Archaeologist, or, like a Kraben Inspector, the Hard Evidence card, then you can allocate 1 damage to trample through. But let's just assume that they didn't block at all. This is 2, it's 3 with the trigger, right? 3 Witherbloom, +2, so that's 5. This is 10 points of damage. This is 10% of the table's life total. If they don't block. +2/+0, +2/+0, 2 Witherbloom triggers, 10 damage. So that's pretty interesting. I'm going to put this in the sideboard here just to keep in mind. And then Erosium also says, I want to hear your thoughts about cards like this in general that care about putting the specific card in the specific deck. You guys are great builders, so I'm here to learn. Well, thank you. I think I'm glad that we have something to offer for you. You'll always be able to pay the collect evidence tax on extracted confession. Yeah, and you'll notice that both Clay and I both have extracted confession.
Quickly, one of my favorite spells.
This card is...
spoiled, I was like, yes, yes, yes.
And let me
No,
let me sell you on Spinning Darkness even more. Spinning Darkness is exactly 6 mana.
mm,
So you can have sequences where in a deck like this, you mill, you Spinning Darkness something, and then you untap and you have no cards in your graveyard because they were all black, and then you go Extract a Confession, and it costs you nothing else out of your graveyard. It's really, really good. Those cards go hand in hand together. It also works great with cards like Gurmag Angler that are basically a 1 mana 5/5, but then when you want to kill something, you can just eat the Gurmag Angler if you wanted to. Usually you'd want to keep it there for other purposes, but yeah, that's a way to look at it. And the Stool Pigeon says, just tuning in. Well, welcome, Stool. Maybe it's worth slotting in something like Springleaf Drum. It's a ramp spell that fits into the curve. It does fit into the curve, but it's an artifact. And I think that's the big problem. Like with Clay's list and with mine, we really are trying to prioritize. Like in
spell
Clay's, it's
slinging, baby.
spells. Yeah, exactly. And Witherbloom Apprentice has always had tension with that kind of a thing because there's great cards like Bonder's Ornament, Network Terminal, Lantern of Revealing, all this shit where you're just like,
I mean, yeah, even an arcane signet is problematic.
Arcane Signet. Yep. You can even Arkham's Astrolabe, and so which has always been one of the tensions with Witherbloom Apprentice. There's certain cards you want in the deck. That help you play the long game, like a Bonder's Ornament, because you're a control deck, but it doesn't drain anybody, right? So, anyways, Scion of Halaster is really good in this deck, Clay. I think that there's a good point there. Now, I will say though that Scion of Halaster is very slow, which is okay because again, this is kind of like a Slimes are inherently proactive mid-range. Witherbloom, at the very least, is like I would say passive mid-range, if not control. So we're dynamic. This is a dynamic mid-range deck. That's the language I use. That, by the way, I haven't really introduced this concept to very often, but like I look at aggro. There's like combo aggro, and then there's a subsect of aggro, which is Voltron. And then in mid-range, we have proactive ones that really want to get into the red zone. You have dynamic ones like this one where really it has both, right? It has both, right? You've got Witherbloom Apprentice, which is like got reach, but it's also gaining you life. And then you've got your slimes, so you've got kind of command zone and the deck are different. Rilsa Rail is technically a proactive mid-range deck, but Rilsa Rail is just a great control game too. Like you slap a Viridian Longbow on that lady and it gets really messy. It's like she's a death-touching 2/5. Like, so that's also a dynamic mid-range deck. TPI, passive mid-range deck. We don't attack that much. We set up a wall. We ping. We protect our stuff. We draw cards. We counter spells. We kill things. Reactive. It's not necessarily reactive. That's the wrong word. I say passive because it's just not like it's not like swinging for the fences, right? So, anyways, I just wanted to kind of throw that out there, and then
And the difference between a slower mid-range deck and a faster control list is a control list doesn't have the density of threats that a mid-range list has.
Yes.
So just to cap that in.
Yeah, that's
off
important. Absolutely. And I've added in here, for some reason I didn't have it in here, but Extract a Confession is definitely a card that we're going to want here. Love that card. I think Generascent and Troll of Khazad-dûm should probably be in your list too, but those are just cards that I never leave home without.
Yeah, so I have the spell versions of those.
Right. So let's make those changes. We're going to go Abundant Harvest here, and this is actually pretty cool tech, just like this one, and Thirsting Roots, and or Vines. Oh, Thirsting Roots. That was what I typed. Okay, weird. So both of these, I don't know what the hell is going on with that, but Thirsting Roots and Abundant Harvest are going to both go under lands, and then we'll cut basics for them. And we may change this mana base a little bit here. And then Stool says, any excuse to play Spinning Darkness is a win in my book. I found like 10 of them in a random box. Spinning Darkness is broken as hell. Like a free Lightning Helix? Like, are you kidding me? That's crazy. It is crazy good. The fact that it's like a drain trigger, it's 3 damage. The fact that it doesn't kill non-black shit basically doesn't matter.
And it's one of those things, like I love a great Spinning Darkness too, but I've had one or more in my hand with 2 black spells in my graveyard.
Oh,
Many
sure.
times.
Well, and I think that I think that that's one thing about your list and my list that are going to be really different. I do a lot of self mill. Like I'm not playing a slime on turn 3. I'm playing a slime on turn 4 because I want to go turn 2 Witherbloom Apprentice, or ideally turn 1 mill, turn 2 Witherbloom Apprentice, turn 3 mill,
likely
and
the same. Our first 4 turns are probably going to mirror each other.
yeah.
Exactly.
So I've got some differences in here that are concessions to how good the cards are for our game plan, and that is Ghoul Caller's Bell. I think is a card that I didn't have in any of my slime decks at first, and as I started to realize how important it was to be able to mill for 1 mana, and in this case repeatedly, if you have a Ghoul Caller's Bell in your opening hand, you are going to, on average, mill 9 cards for 1 mana. Right, because average game in cPDH ends on turn 9,
and you're gonna
right?
have onboard protection against the worst Archaeomancers and
That's true.
Mystic Sanctuary.
If somebody is playing Melek, you can kind of like shut them down. If somebody is using Tatiova combo, you can mill the Mystic Sanctuary.
Or Bibliotech Assistant. Yeah.
Yep, there's a lot of, or not the Mystic Sanctuary, but the Tidal Bore. So that's good against that. So I've got Ghoul Caller's Bell. I also have Seeds of Hope, which I think in my version of the deck is going to be much more consistent. Oftentimes this is going to be a mill 2, get nothing. Right. But as a mill card, it's really good because it's 1 mana. It is mill 2, which is about the same rate as a 4 mana mill, or 2 mana mill 4, right?
And
it's
you gain
instant.
3 life.
Yep, it's gain 3 life. You're gonna drain for 1, and it's instant speed. So if you don't need to kill anything, you just use your 1 last mana instead of Lash of Malice or something like that. You just go Seeds of Hope, right? So I've got that one. I do have Village Rites and Corrupted Conviction.
Those are in my sideboard.
Yes, and then I also have Deathcap Marionette and Mire Triton, which are both 2 mana mill 2s that have Death Touch on them. Which is, the Death Touch isn't really why I'm playing them. It's because they're a 2 mana mill 2. And the Death Touch is useful though. If somebody comes clapping, right, they want to come and like hit us in return and we're getting all aggressive, like these cards are going to make that hard, and Death Touch works great with the fight spells. Yeah, right. Like this is great with Ram Through or Mutant's Prey or Titanic Brawl. Like Mutant's Prey won't work because it needs a +1/+1 counter on it to work. And then I've got like Glowspore Shaman, and a lot of the other things are similar. I have Tapping at the Window. I'm not sure if this will stay. It's 2 mana mill 3, reveal a creature from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest in your graveyard, and then you can cast it again from your graveyard. So I think that this card probably is fine. But then I really, really like these 2 ones, and you might not be familiar with them. Gray Slad and Colossal Badger.
Let's see. I'm trying to look for them in...
So just all the cards is 2 mana. They're ventures, right? 2 mana, mill 4.
Yeah.
That's all they are. 2 mana, mill 4, right? The Colossal Badger is largely just like, you have to have a creature in play. That can be the Witherbloom Apprentice, which is pretty sick. So if you go like turn 2 Witherbloom Apprentice, turn 3 Dig Deep, and you like mill 4 cards and there's 1 creature in there, then it gets a counter. But it's really just mill 4. And then there's a body on it. 2 mana mill 4, great. And then later on, we're going to get a body. Gray Slad is very good. If you have 4 or more creature cards in your graveyard, it's going to get Menace and Death Touch on a 4/1. So it's kind of like a skeleton, right? Which is sweet. And then I have, I think Sprout Swarm might not make the cut here, just because I don't think that it's likely that we're gonna be like leaving our oozes up. Like the best case scenario is you'd cast an ooze and then end a turn, tap some stuff, but I don't think Sprout Swarm's gonna make the cut here. Weather the Storm, Reaping the Graves, and Sprouting Vines are, I think, big game. In this deck. And I think Reaping the Graves is going to work here. We have 15 creatures. That'll probably go down a little bit, but that's okay.
So on the Storm, so when you put all the stuff on, you only need 1 creature in the graveyard once the Storm stack happens.
Yep, just 1.
All your copies are going... well, I'm clarifying. I know you know this. I'm clarifying this for
yes,
the chat.
for the audience.
So Ryan's build leans more into like the opportunity of having a good reaping the graves, because you'll probably, especially with the swamper forest cycling creatures, being able to put something in the yard and then having a target for that later on.
Yeah.
You know, I won't have that opportunity.
Oh, here, I just got another good one. There's another one, and chat, shame on you for not informing me of this, but we have Rubble Belt Maverick. This is another card that I think should be in all slime decks. It's 1 mana creature for a 1/1 that surveils 2 on ETB, and then you can exile it from your graveyard to put a +1/+1 counter. And like as impact goes, it's not super high impact, but like you always get something for this card. If you mill it over and you turn Witherbloom into a 3/3, it doesn't die to mass sweepers anymore, right? If you play it, it's put 2 cards in the graveyard, or put a card you don't want in the graveyard and a card you do on top, or or don't, or just keep them, right? Like it's a very good card for a deck like this. We definitely want that.
Because you get something on the way in, and you get something, well, not necessarily on the way out, but after the fact.
I wish this worked. This would be so cool, because the oozes come in with the counters. They don't enter and then die with the counters on the stack, right? That's not how they work. But this would be very cool if you could like surveil every time you played an ooze. Snarling Gorehound's pretty cool. There's also Sinister Starfish, which is a very funny name. But this is a 2 mana tap to surveil 1. Other ones, Barrier of Bones surveils 1. It's not really good enough. It has to be kind of multiple things, like Wary Thespian being surveil 1 when it enters, surveil 1 when it dies. Still not good enough. We really want to be focusing on spells wherever possible. The only thing is that you run out of self-mill spells that are not creatures. Most it's part of the strength of like Tortex green decks is that they have a lot of creatures, like Satyr Wayfinder, basically. Satyr Wayfinder analogs, if you will. Okay, so I think the other thing I'm looking at here is I'm not sure whether this is an Opal Palace deck or not.
I put it in mine.
I kind of like it.
The reason why is at the end of the day, it converts a color.
Yeah, it does.
It comes into play untapped, which I'm a big fan of that.
Yep.
Who gives a shit about the colorless mana? We only have, I think it's the only colorless mana producing land in my list anyway.
You're going to use that colorless for slimes.
Yeah, and it converts a color if you need that.
Yep.
That's relevant. And then it creates an opportunity for Witherbloom to be plan D.
Yeah. So then maybe in my list, should I be cutting some of the fetch lands here?
So
like Escape Tunnel, Evolving Wilds, and Terramorphic could totally go.
I'm not one to tell a man his business.
Well, however, I think we're gonna do it.
If it's important, so those of you out there listening in internet land, it's important to you to have untapped mana in turns 1 through 4, then please get rid of your Terramorphic Expanses and Evolving Wilds and all that.
Yeah, I agree.
I promise you, we have enough velocity available to us with the mana ramp. That mana fixing will be fine.
I think, and actually as a broader point, I have very, very few decks that I play nowadays that have any of those cards in them. Because the mana bases nowadays there's either incentives to play artifact lands, so there's actually multiple things. Most decks that I play have some reason to be doing artifact stuff, which means that you definitely want the mana rocks, or sorry, the artifact lands. Often, or actually in every deck I play, I want both dual lands that are typal duals, because I play Generoscent and Troll. I'm always going to play those cards, right? So I always want to have the option of getting a dual, and that is important to me. And then beyond that, you're going to have other considerations. Like you're going to have, when you get into 3-color decks, it starts to get really wild. But like, because then you have like thriving lands where you can like pick things, you have gates and all this other stuff. But I ultimately find it very hard to justify those cards when you have cards like Path of Ancestry, you know, like the typal ones that you can tutor up. Like it's just very good. We're only playing Bajuka Bog, right? If we're playing crop rotation, should we be playing crop rotation?
So I'm on the fence, and the reason so I have I have snow lands in my list, and it's basically because I'm playing the one snow fetch. But I'm actually thinking about switching out the Into the North and actually putting in a crop rotation um, to basically convert all my snow lands back to regular. So I'm on the fence. I'm about 60-40 leaning in the direction of going
Yeah,
non-snows.
it's a big question with crop rotation of what are we getting. And so with crop rotation, if we're getting Bajuka Bog, that's a very premium hit. The other thing is we can play Golgari Rot Farm to instant speed, end of turn, pick up our Bajuka Bog and then play it during our turn. So that's a way to get two uses out of it. You can also pick up and you can also what's the other one? Pick up a Mortuary Mire and then put the Mortuary Mire, put something back on top. But
So
this deck doesn't really benefit as much from Mortuary Mire as other decks do.
mm,
And so I
yeah,
think that because of that, crop rotation mostly finds Bajuka Bog, and then it kind of finds Opal Palace. And really, the beauty of crop rotation is when it does a lot of things. If you're in Abzan and it's like Sajuri Step, Bajuka
mhm.
Bog, Mortuary Mire, Opal Palace, and you're just like crazy, or like
Well,
Colony Garden.
another way to look at it too is like there's some. It's not S tier synergies, but crop rotation, sacrificing a land, thinning. Remember that
Yeah,
thinning thinning the deck along with all of your other 1 mana thinners, and then also like the mill spells that we're playing. A lot of them say get a land from your graveyard, not milled this
that's true.
turn.
That's true. Yeah, so there
So
are
we have
synergies there, but the reason I'm asking about it is because, as to your point about tap lands, Bajuka Bog is increasingly a card that I've been rather low on, and the reason for it is,
I cut it from Conrad.
yeah, from Conrad. Oh, I don't know if that's a good idea, because Conrad, you can point it to yourself. Eh.
It,
Okay, we'll agree to
the
disagree on that one. It's
I
like,
mean, you
yeah,
played against my Conrad control list.
yep,
The goal of the deck is to keep everybody off creatures for the first 6 turns. If I have one misstep in that sequencing
yeah.
to include a tapped land, you're screwed.
I just
So
generally don't find that tap lands interrupt my curve as much as like as some people are concerned about. Like yourself, like you're definitely more concerned about missing those tap lands. In this deck, our land requirements are more intense because we have like Abundant Harvest is Ash Barrens, right? And actually, we're gonna cut Ash Barrens because we don't need Ash Barrens if we have Thirsting Roots and Abundant Harvest. That it
correct.
is a better version. And actually, for everyone watching, Generosent and Troll of Khazad-dûm are also better versions of Ash Barrens. The only time that they aren't is when you needed the untapped colorless source. So, but like not very common, right? Not very common. And the reason I'm asking about all this is because Bajuka Bog is at its very best when it's instant speed, and crop rotation is the only way we're going to do that. So, what I'm saying is we cut Bajuka Bog because we're not playing crop rotation, and because exiling graveyards is like ultimately the timing on it is so important. The fact that Bajuka Bog is mostly sorcery speed makes it a lot worse because graveyard stuff happens during your opponent's turn.
Yeah, it does.
Right?
I mean,
So,
the only so there's a non-zero amount of times that a Bajuka Bog will catch. Like for example, when an Abdel or
yep,
other flicker-based deck starts going off, if they don't quite have it in their hand, then every single spell in their graveyard, they're going to
is
try to,
there.
they're just going to try to like worm their way through. So if you're
Yeah.
able to just kind of like steal that.
I think that that's a fair point. And or the other angle we could take to it is that because we're not a deck that wins fast, we do want Bajuka Bog. That could be the other
Yeah.
argument to it. But I think that I'm going to leave it out for now and see if I feel like I get burned
Hmm.
by it. And
Let
if it's
me
mhm.
let me know when you want to talk about Deepwood Denizen.
Yep. So this is I was getting there. Zach said Zach Bear, one of our long-term patrons here and a
Brew
good friend
Bear.
of mine, Brew Bear. You should always tag him if you're looking at something weird and you want advice on it. He makes a lot of really good weird decks. So he's a person to follow on Moxfield. He suggests Deepwood Denizen, and this was a huge miss on my deck. And this is a card that's easy to forget about as a very powerful draw engine in green. 6 mana activation is like nauseatingly big, right? Except that it's reduced by 1 for each +1/+1 counter on creatures you control. So this is kind of like a slow Monarch engine, I would say. Like you play this card out, you're getting an extra card every turn, and it's vigilant, so you can attack with it too, which is pretty cool. You can attack and then end of turn on your opponent's turn, or maybe when it's about to die, you can pay 1 green, tap it, and draw a card. That seems great. If we have 2 slimes in play minimum, we're gonna have enough, right? Because
So you're setting the stage for me. Thank
yep,
you.
hit it, baby.
So I think it's a trap, and I'll tell you why. Because if we subscribe to the aforementioned first slime on turn 4,
Mm-hmm.
and that first slime is going to be a 2/2, and then our second slime on turn 5 is
Yep.
going to be a 3/3. So there's your 5
Mm-hmm.
+1/+1 counter. So now that means turn 6 we're playing a Deepwood Denizen. Now, will that be the appropriate time to play a Deepwood Denizen, especially when we could potentially be playing another
slime?
I'll
That's
leave
a
that
good
to
point.
the audience.
I think that's
Now-
a good point. Yeah.
Now, to that end, let's say by happenstance, so turn 4 slime, turn 5 slime, turn 6 Deepwood Denizen, turn 7 draw off of Deepwood Denizen.
7, 8, 9 draw. So if this drew 3 cards for right, because so total mana cost, we're saying Deepwood Denizen, and then when it untaps, draw a card. Next turn, draw a card. Next turn, draw a card. By turn 9, we can anticipate, on average, the game will be over. So I think that you're right that like the trap, this could be a trap because it like you would rather just play a slime. You're not going to always have one though.
It's in that weird crux of like, do I play the slime? Like, there's a lot of variables. Like, what does my board state look like? What does the pod look like? All of that stuff. Are we engaged in a slower game? Do I have the opportunity? Because this isn't, to use a word loosely, this would be somewhat of an engine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say so.
Right?
Yeah.
But if you're going to draw 3 cards for 3 mana, 6 mana, wouldn't you want to play like what's that, Siphon Mine instead?
Siphon Mind would be 4 to draw 3, but it wouldn't come with a body. Siphon Mind would probably just be better because we're also getting a drain trigger off of it. Yeah, I think that's actually a good way to look at it, and it's why we need to do this sort of like analytical breakdown on cards. For 4 mana, you can get a 3/2 Vigilance that drew you a card if it survives, or for 4 mana, you could draw 3, make everybody discard 1, and get a trigger. And the trigger is 3 damage, which is his power. So I think that actually answers our question. Over the longer game, this is going to be better.
Right. So this is where we need to put our tinfoil hats on, and we start looking at, okay, what is the expectation of our experience?
Yeah.
So if we base it on historical factors, then that informs us that, okay, this is the pace that we're going to play.
Yep.
This is how we're going to engage, not to use the PDH pod and their pillars, but how are we going to not run out of gas? This falls into that category, but
absolutely,
at what cost?
Yeah. And I think that the question there too could be it's a curve consideration, because like let's like review that we talked about. Turn 2, Witherbloom Apprentice. Turn 3, we're already talking about not playing a slime. Right? We're talking about milling and holding up interaction in some cases.
By necessity.
Right? And then turn 4 is our first slime. Turn 5 is our second slime. turn 6, we play the Deepwood Denizen, and turn 7 is the first time we would draw off of it, assuming our slimes were alive. So yeah, too slow. I would say it's too slow. Actually, I'm gonna reel back. That's why I've got it in my sideboard here, just so we can kind of keep that in mind. Let's talk about a couple of other cards too here, because we're actually missing a couple of things. Mm-hmm.
But that said, if we were a ramp style deck where the object is big mana and all that stuff, Deepwood Denizen is a different conversation.
Differently, yeah, because you'd probably play it on like turn 3, and then and that's another way to look at the Deepwood Denizen. Actually, play it on turn 3, turn 4 slime, turn 5 slime, draw a card. And then it goes a little bit different that way. But that's like prioritizing cards over killing people. And I think that slimes are very good at killing people. And I want to get swinging with them early. I want to get them in my graveyard. And I want to get moving, you know? Like, I want to, like, it's proactive.
I'm shedding it. You're making me cry.
Well, you know, this is you know, when people are talking about you need to be fast, I think that they're misspeaking. You want to be proactive.
Pressure.
Yes.
Energy.
And you want to get movement.
Yeah.
We're going to use some really esoteric terminology in capturing this, right? But we want, you know, I do think that it's important to make forward progress in games. And I think there's a lot of commanders that people see, like even like Thrall Parasite, it starts getting forward progress on turn 2, right? It's a control deck, but its commander, right, is like it pushes, right? So you really want to have those sorts of tools there.
Frickin' Lobbert.
Lobbert says, "Wow, it's the guys from the YouTube banner." Yeah, I still haven't changed the banner to like have it only be me or anything, because it just doesn't feel right, you know. And plus, we got to have your beautiful mug on there. So I did want to talk about a couple of other cards though before we move on to like cutting and and doing all this stuff. Essence Harvest. I think this is a card that you want to have in your deck if you're playing slimes. Essence Harvest is a 2 and a black sorcery. Target player loses X life, and you gain X life, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. This does not hit everyone, but keep in mind that if an opponent kills your biggest slime, this just finds your next biggest slime and says, how much power does that have? So you can't really stop it.
And as long as X is greater than 3, then you're on rate or better.
If we looked at it this like, I would probably want it to be more. I would say like if this is 6.
Yeah, right. I'm looking, the worst case scenario, because
worst case scenario, like deal 3, gain 3 is basically a 3 mana lightning helix, which is not great, but also like it's going to be okay.
Not to mention your Witherbloom.
Oh, that's true. So at the very least, if you had a 2/2 slime, this would still deal 3 damage. So, and you would gain 3 life. But at the top end, this is like, I dome you for 9. Actually 10, right? If it's a 9/9 slime and you hit them, with this, it's going to be 10. 10 damage is a lot of damage. This is like a 3 mana mob justice, right? And it gains you life. That's the crazy thing, right? Like, if you dome somebody for 10 with this and you gain 10, I think you're going to be in a really good spot to win the game. Because you're not just going to use this on them. You're going to cast this. And in fact, you probably try to go to attacks first. You attack first, and then you use Essence Harvest afterwards. The other one that I wanted to talk about too is Rite of Consumption. Is another one. This one's kind of the same idea, but you do have to sacrifice the creature. So I think that's one of the reasons maybe not to play it, because our slimes, like, you do eventually run out of slimes in hand. And so just like tossing them away is probably not relevant. It is not what we want to be doing, but it is a way to fling without the ability to kill the thing that we're flinging. We just sacrifice it and it does the damage, right? I think this card here is more aggressive than I want to get here, so I'm probably gonna cut this one for now, but it's gonna be on people's minds. And we probably would play something like Virulent Swipe first. 1 mana, instant speed, gets a bunch of triggers, pushes a bunch of extra damage. Virulent Swipe can also turn our blockers into Death Touchers. That's pretty tight. Like, you have like a Blanchwood Prowler and somebody like comes pounding in with their commander and we go Virulent Swipe block, or like block Virulent Swipe. That's pretty cool. And then Ram Through, of course, is definitely there. And thank you, Zach. Zach says, wow, that was an awesome analysis. You betcha, bud. So we got 10 cards to cut here. Let's make some cuts. We got Extract a Confession. How important do you think edicts are in this deck, Clay?
So I almost like this better than the Go for the Throat because it's sorcery speed and it's my 2 mana. Like I can think of numerous examples on turn 2 where somebody's deployed like a land tapper or a TPI.
Well, watch out. You don't want to trigger Lobert. He edicted away my TPI, that poor guy. And then and it hurt us all so much.
So I mean,
yeah, but
speed,
2 mana edict is just efficient as fuck. If you hit 3 cards with this for 2 mana, it's really good rate, right? And the card that I wanted to mention as well alongside that is Vraska's Fall. Instant speed, hits 3 cards, right? I think this is also kind of a great place to be as well for edicts there. So I think that's what we want. In mine, you could say maybe you play the other edict creatures, but like edict creatures are better when you have like a commander that wants to attack that has like menace. So like edicts are really, mass edicts are actually pretty good in
or can
like
exploit the graveyard, or if you're leaning into the scam, reanimation stuff, or like edict creatures. They once were ubiquitous, but now we've found their niche.
There's a thing that they had a niche before. They killed
well, yeah.
every combo creature in play, like, and they still do. But their range has changed a lot, right? Like sometimes they're just as good as they always were, and other times they're terrible.
Yeah, think about all the Grey Flickers that we have now.
Yeah,
we only had a couple of those like way back when,
and now we have 5 1-mana ones. We have Fake Your Own Death, which is 2 but gives you a treasure, and we have. I mean, yeah, they've gotten way more efficient. Right, way more efficient to be able to wipe the board with them. So 11 cards to cut here. Chat, let me know what you want to cut. And I also want to make another point here. We've been really providing super in-depth analysis on a lot of the key cards here, but I want to point out just a couple more that we've kind of missed. That is Gurmag Angler. And Gurmag Angler is actually, let's start with Hooting Mandrills, okay?
Oh,
so
I just noticed something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Everybody that's watching this should hit that like button.
Oh, chat. Thank you all for being here so much. We've got 10 of you who've been in here for a while. You should know that likes, comments, subscriptions, all that stuff really puts these videos into the hands of other people who you eventually may be able to play cPDH with. And that's a really good thing for everybody. So the contributions you make that are free to the algorithm by just leaving a comment for the algorithm or commenting on it or asking a question or leaving a like, all those things really help. And of course, if you do want to take your support further, you can go to patreon.com/common connoisseurs and you can join the supporters only section of the Discord for only $2 a month. And every time I make a deck update, I will ping you and let you know that I've changed it. That's the only way to keep update on all up to date physically. It's the only way to keep up to date on all the decks that we make changes to here.
All
so
497 of them.
Yeah, I have 396 decks right now. It's too many. But anyways, I wanted to point out Hooting Mandrills, and starting with Hooting Mandrills first instead of Gurmag Angler, because every time you play Slimes, you are in green, you should play Hooting Mandrills. Hooting Mandrills is 1 mana 4/4 trample. And when you go turn 3 Slime, turn 4 Slime into Hooting Mandrills, you are like, it's a very high tempo play, right? A 1 mana 4/4 to get the same efficiency off of a Slime would have to be a 12/12, right? 1 mana for 4/4 with trample, 2 mana for an 8/8, 3 mana for a 12/12. It's very efficient is what I'm saying, which is why when you play black, you get Gurmag Angler. And it's even better, right? It doesn't have trample, but still being able to go like, or, maybe in this deck we go Witherbloom Apprentice, and then turn 3 we self-mill, and then we play a Gurmag Angler, right? Like that's really good too. Or on turn 4, right, we go turn 2 Witherbloom Apprentice, turn 3 self-mill, maybe kill something, turn 4 Slime, Gurmag Angler, go. Right, we're doubling our power, right? Like we're putting a ton of power into play.
And the reason why is because, in case you didn't read the cards, the delve doesn't affect the slime play.
Oh yeah.
The
Thank you.
Count themselves in
yes.
exile, which allows me to pivot to Erosium's comment a little while ago about why don't we play Relic. Honestly, like if you're going to play one piece of graveyard removal or graveyard hate, Relic is the one that you play. Now
There's two
I'm
other
playing
ones though.
I'm playing right. I'm playing Scarab Feast because early game it's velocity, late game it's remove graveyard. But
What's
like
a coffin per? I think that there's two other ones that I would recommend even over Scarab Feast. Scarab Feast is nice because you can draw a card with it too. But I think that the two that are very premium, especially because you want to self mill, is Rotten Reunion and Coffin Purge. Both of these cards can be milled into your graveyard, which is card advantage, and then cast from your graveyard. Right, and in the case of Rotten Reunion, you even get a creature out of it, which is really cool. Somebody casts like a Fleshbag Marauder, and maybe your commander isn't in play for some reason. Say somebody swept the board, and all you have is Slimes, and then they go Fleshbag Marauder. You can go Rotten Reunion, make a 2/2, exile something from a graveyard, and it's like Edict Protection. And then Coffin Purge is the same thing, but it's only 1 to flashback. I think both of these are really premium. Scarab Feast is also good because it can draw a card in a pinch. Like if you don't need the graveyard, if you don't need the graveyard hate, it just becomes a draw spell, which I think is also a good reason to play it too. I think those are kind of how I'd look at it. Relic also doesn't trigger.
Fairy Macabre is free if you're playing, if you're on a creature-based plan as well.
I think Fairy Macabre, if we're looking at this deck and we're saying our main problem that we want to solve is combo, so we want to have like cheap and free interaction, Fairy Macabre is great. And Fairy Macabre with cards like Corpse Churn, it's a flyer, but like I think there's even another layer to this. With cards like Corpse Churn, with Grapple with the Past, Grizzly Salvage, tapping at the window, you can actually use it and then get it back. There's a lot of ways to get it back.
My brother in Cardboard, you don't have to sell me. I just spent the last 3 months doing that same thing with Conrad.
Yes.
Tortured Existence, get it back, cycle something else, get it back,
The reason I pointed out is because we actually could, there's an argument for leaning heavier into enchantment and artifact destruction and graveyard hate as our interaction instead of removal. Removal is good. It's not as great as like counterspells are to us. Our main thing is like we just want to make big slimes and then like run people over with them, right? So cards like Nature's Claim are actually like pretty good here. Destroy target artifact or enchantment, its controller gains 4 life. Now the gain 4, I don't love it. It's basically gain 3 because we're going to drain them as well. But you could play cards like Natural State, right, which is destroy target artifact. Basically any artifact or enchantment is what this reads. It doesn't destroy Pestilence, but you don't. If somebody plays a Pestilence, I'm like, cool.
Cool story, bro.
Sick, bro. Do not play a Pestilence into a slime deck. Okay, just don't do it. You're gonna thank me later. But cards like this are kind of like I'm considering them. Like maybe.
And to your point about favoring other types of removal rather than spot removal for creatures, there is an opportunity. I was trying to think through really quickly. I think the very specific Trickery Charm type shenanigans is the only like loophole around that. I think that's the only combo interaction that I can think of that doesn't involve an enchantment or an artifact.
Mm-hmm.
So if you wanted to favor, more other permanent base removal, like Abdel desperately needs colored mana rocks.
It really does, yeah. Yeah, and it's also like when you're
land. Abdel says non-land, so they can't flicker their own lands. So they have to have the colored mana rocks. So if you're killing the colored mana rocks,
I mean, it could be a big deal, right? Like killing a Freed from the Real, killing a Nurok Stealth Suit against TPI, killing like an Unruly Catapult, killing a pinger, right? Or killing an Ashnod's Altar could be good. Not always. Sometimes it's really bad, but like sometimes Ashnod's Altar in that deck is like not good, and other times it does like extraordinarily busted shit in TPI. But there's a lot of reasons to run those things. So now we're looking and we're saying maybe our interaction gets better if we don't kill creatures as much. We like take some of the creature removal out and we play some artifact enchantment destruction.
It's worth a look, especially because there are now you don't want to. What's that one spell that says target opponent can gain 6 life, destroy all enchantments. Uh,
Reverend Silence.
yeah, I don't know if you want to like
I like that card.
grant. I don't know if you want to grant in this deck. I don't know if you want to grant your opponent like 6 life, which could be the meaning, like the difference of a good swing or not. Like I don't know if
Yeah,
you want to
I
do
see that.
that.
When I played Slimes last time, let me put it this way. My first hit with my Slimes was 38 damage.
Hmm.
Okay. The second hit was gonna be 52, but the table put me down. Okay, like
Mhm.
when you see somebody get bitch slapped across the room by like 38 power with the Slimes, it's serious. Like, so I think 6 life is actually not that much,
Well,
right? That could be a way to look at it, right?
and that's fair in those more combo oriented slime decks.
Yeah.
This one is definitely going to be a slower burn.
Well, that scenario. So you're right. That scenario I'm talking about was Galloping Lizrog, where I never cast my commander. It was just Slimes. So I think like gain 6, yeah, that kind of feels bad. But you could also each other. Oh, that kills it. Sorry. Yeah, we're not giving our opponents 18 life. That's basically like saying you don't have a commander. That's a different story, I think, for sure. Yeah. Okay, that's valid. So I did cut. Defile, Disfigure, Ghastly Demise, Lash of Malice, Mutant's Prey, Titanic Brawl, Vendetta, Ram Through, Drown in Filth. What other? So let's just say here. Let's just use interaction in this case. Or I guess we're gonna have to do removal. That's fine. I just wanted to put all. Usually, what I do in Slimes decks is because they don't play as much interaction. I'll just say interaction, and then I'll make all of them one slot. But I've got global tags on right now, so we're just going to remove this, and we're going to put these under naturalize. Naturalize, and then naturalize. I like both of these for being like 1 mana instant speed. And then I actually think these are going to be great too for graveyards. I think we're going to play both of them. Also, Rotten Reunion and Coffin Purge are 2 triggers each. Right? Like that's actually like quite a bit of damage with Witherbloom Apprentice when you kind of get moving with those. Also, Vines of Vastwood should probably be in the deck too.
I decided to opt out of the removal or the protection rather, because we talked about earlier, like if someone is foolish enough to get rid of your Witherbloom, then
this
that's
isn't
a blessing.
This is so the way I see what you're saying, and you're right. I would say Vines of Vastwood is good because it interrupts other people. It can pump our slimes and it can protect a slime. If this protects like an 8/8 slime, it's really good. But again, this is like another natural state kind of a card, right? 1 mana premium interaction that is going to stop something from happening.
That's fair.
I think that's kind of where I see this one. And this is making me want to cut Drown in Filth. It mills and it kills, but it's 2 mana and it's sorcery speed.
Yeah, the Drown in Filth is untested because you never know exactly how many lands you're going to have in your graveyard.
Probably -2/-2 minimum, but it could be as much as like -10, -10. Like it could be really, really big. The fact that it does both double duty, maybe the way we look at this is that it's not a removal spell. This is just a mill spell, and occasionally it kills something. And if it's a 2 mana mill 4, that's actually good enough. And then when you add in that it probably does kill something, it's like good. So let me get on top of the questions here. Benji says, or sorry, Dave says, I guess out of curiosity, do we need to rely on creatures to mill running Witherbloom for the double synergy since you already need to make some cuts? Do we need to rely on creatures to mill? So the goal here is to play as many instants and sorceries as we can overall. Right, creatures are not really like something that we want to focus on here, but the creatures are often going to be the ones that do the milling the most efficiently. So that's kind of one of the ways to look at that. So I would say actually with that rationale, I think we can cut Deathcap Marionette and we can cut Mire Triton. Both of these cards are good. They have Death Touch. I like them a lot, right? They're going to be removal spells in Voltron matchups or something like that. But they only mill 2 for 2 mana, and we want to mill 4 for 2 mana, at least 3. So I think we can cut those. That's down to 107. And then Lobert says, been looking for room for some good graveyard hate after losing to Flicker a lot lately. Yeah, your best graveyard hate is going to be like Nihil Spellbomb when you're in black is about as good as it gets because it's a card that you can plunder away and still draw.
It depends on what your commander is.
If you're in black though right now, plundering is really really good. Tormod, like I think sorry, not Tormod, but Conrad might be an exception where like you might not want to go into artifacts super hard, but you could too. You could like perfectly reasonable in Tormod or sorry in that, but
yeah, I play Macabre and
Macabre is insane in that deck, and Scarab Feast too would be good. The other one, of course, like I think Coffin Purge and Rotten Reunion are fabulous. Yeah. A Relic of Progenitus is not a card that I play that much anymore. Relic of Progenitus cannot be plundered away profitably. It destroys your own graveyard too, and ultimately the chipping away is nice. But
this is a good opportunity to
card has fallen for me.
Well, let's make some distinctions here. So Ryan and I already know and accept that there is no such thing as staple card.
Yes.
And
believe it, you heard it here.
Relic of Progenitus is what is widely considered to be a staple card because it's colorless. You can slot it in. It provides some sort of card selection, that sort of stuff. It does fill a generic need across the board for almost every single deck.
Onboard disruption that replaces itself very cheaply. But that card has very real costs to it. Blowing up your own graveyard is not free, especially when you're in black, especially when you're in blue.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very important.
So now we start to pivot from staple considerations to what synergistic considerations we need to have for our list. And this is what Ryan, he's that way. This is what Ryan is talking about. This is what Ryan is talking about, is whether or not you're going to have a net loss in playing the card or not. Like I said, I mean, I would start every list with considering Relic as a part of the 99 and then make adjustments based on, what your commander is trying to do, what your deck is trying to do, and even how you're playing,
like what is your curve like, right? Like in this deck, for example, it turns off Spinning Darkness, it turns off Ghastly Demise, it turns off all the graveyard recursion of like bringing back lands, it turns off your Hooting Mandrills and your Gurmag Angler, right? You wouldn't want it here. And it's also not an instant or a sorcery. Often black decks want it to be a creature so that they can Tortured Existence loop it, so that's where Fairy Macabre is really good. But yeah, those are some things to think about.
I was showing off my 40
Yeah, those are hot. Those are spendy too. Wow.
I got them at $4.23. So.
That is spendy. When you have to build a deck with that many, it was like 100 something bucks. Oh, it was Clay. Oh, we lost him again. Chat. Oh no. Pray for Clay. Pray for Clay. He's coming back. Okay, a couple other things. Erosium says the worst thing that can happen to your slimes while they're in the grave is getting them shuffled. Yep, never going to happen. I like Jack-o'-lantern, Lobert. No one is going to cast an Undying spell if it's on board. And Erosium, you are such a fan of one-drop artifact hate. Yeah, that's right. And then a bunch of conversation about graveyard hate. Yeah, exactly. And then Lobber was saying this discussion on Relic is specifically why I'm on Nihil Spellbomb. And there are certain decks out there that are really, really good with Tortured Existence. And in those decks, I think that's where you really want the... Clay knows all about those. You want Fairy Macabre, okay, so cards, we need to cut 7 more cards. I think...
We're at We're at 2 hours.
Yeah, this is great. This is about where we want to be finishing up. I think Scion of Halaster is going to go. I think that the fact that this card doesn't mill right away, it just makes it not good enough. Like, it's weird on our curve.
It's the Deepwood Denizen
Yeah,
problem.
it is. That's a really good way to put it. Yep. So we'll cut that one. Shriekhorn has been busted. Okay, this card, like, I think in almost every slime deck is like a 1 mana mill 6, which is very good. And then Vines is good. So we kind of have, how many pieces of interaction? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 13, 14, 15, 16. It's kind of a lot. But I also I don't hate that. I like decks with lots of interaction. We could cut Essence Harvest. I think this card is good, but I don't know if it's necessary, right? This is kind of like another slime.
Win more.
Yeah, it's win more. Yeah, I think so. I think we can cut that. Ram through, whole different story. This card is instant speed removal, and it can just like kill somebody. So that's good. Now we're down to 5 cuts. I'm a little nervous about the 32 land count. Because we do need to hit.
You need a higher number of lands than I do.
Or actually, you know what? I don't think I do, because if I miss my 3rd land drop, I can always go Blanchwood Prowler and find it. Or I can go, Glowspore Shaman, or, Satyr Wayfinder, or Winding Way, or Mulch, right? There's a lot of ways actually to get lands. So I think 32 is probably fine, right? These are like, no, they're not ramp, but they're similar.
So what? How many lands are you sitting at right now?
32. With Abundant Harvest, Thirsting Roots, Generous Scent, and Troll.
I mean, I'm confident playing the 28
I'm happy with that.
I have in my list. So like,
yeah, I'm happy with this. And then 5 cards to cut. We've also got the Storm spells here. The cuts are definitely a lot harder here. Also, just like while we were talking, we don't have Marauding Blight Priest and we don't have Epicure of Blood in this deck, and I think that part of that is because, like, would you rather play a Marauding Blight Priest or would you rather play a Slime? That's the question. And Slime, the Blight Priest could be better if we play it instead of a Slime, and every turn we're playing a Slime and we're draining for 2. That's 6 damage. That's actually a pretty big slime. That's a 6/6 slime, but it's hitting everybody, not just one person.
So how many creatures are you running in the list?
12.
12. How many instants and sorceries are you running in the list?
63.
So, and that's sitting at what, 104? It's behind me. I can't see it.
Oh yeah, sorry. We're at 105. Yeah, we're at 105. So we have to make 5 cuts. Some of those will be. Yeah.
So you have to make 5 cuts, and then you have to look at your percentage of creatures versus non-creature spells, and then So the reason why I want to push against the 2 life gain, life drain creatures is because those lean more into a storm type strategy where multiple spells are being cast.
Yeah.
And I think that's antithetical to like this progressional slime thing that we're trying to do.
Yeah. The storm things that
we're literally trying to ooze out onto the board.
Yeah, and I would say too, just as a point of order here, for those of you watching, if you like Witherbloom Apprentice and you really like this strategy of like Golgari Spellslinger, which is very unique, I want to point that out. Like, there is nothing like that in cEDH or in EDH. If you like this commander, take this lesson and learn it. You are not to be creating your own storm count. Okay? You need to be waiting for other people to build the storm count and leech off of them. Building your own storm count and then storming off and then having somebody kill your commander really sucks. Much better to have everybody do all this shit, right? Stack collapses, you get to the end of the turn, and then you leech off of everybody else's storm count. And at that point, then the interaction is mostly gone, right? And then you can safely go off with it. But that's really an important point to keep in mind. You don't want to be creating your own storm. So that's where this is not a storm deck. We just happen to have them in the deck.
Yeah.
So Other cards here
So
that. Go ahead.
yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
you were going to make cuts. Sorry. So regarding the two other like the pinger creatures, and I can't remember what they're called
Epicure
now.
of Blood and Marauding Blight Priest.
Yeah, there's like Jesus, 30,000 cards. There's also another 5 mana Magecraft Witherbloom, right? I
Oh,
forget what
the
it's called.
gains you life. Yeah, it's a hybrid mana, Magecraft, and Golgari that gains you
It,
life
it,
every time.
it's basically the same thing as Witherbloom, right? So like,
Except it doesn't
uh,
drain.
it doesn't drain.
It only
Hmm,
gains. Yeah, that's
that's
it.
right. So I'm thinking about it from the perspective of Dina, where you have a
Yes, it's
drain.
very good
Okay,
in Dina. And for those of you watching, I won't say it again, but keep your eye out for Dina one of these days here. Maybe we'll have to get one of our good patrons on the line here and talk about Dina Soul
there's
Steeper. I like Dina a lot. There's a lot of really cool things you can do with that card. So one of the questions I have for you, Clay, here is I kind of want to bring the land count down even further by adding some more of these cards into it. So I was
so
thinking,
the addition. So think of it. You said it best when you said, and you were basically leveraging at a time no one else was. You were leveraging the tech that was being prophesized in Legacy and all that stuff,
yeah,
where these swamp cyclers and all that stuff could be a land drop.
yes,
Now, I'm not suggesting get that damn ridiculous with this, but basically that's the way I treat it. This attune with ether,
yep.
like the
It's a
caravan
spell
vigil.
land that's going to give
It's a
us a trigger. Yeah. Um,
all I need is one forest in my opening hand and one of these spells, and now I magically have 2 mana.
so
So
what are our premium ones then? Many Partings, Caravan Vigil. Because Caravan Vigil, if you do it second main and one of your slimes died, then you're going to get it right into play, which is great. I think that, and Mede Partings gives you a food. Caravan Vigil. There's also Reclaim the Waste has surprise upside on it, but the most premium ones are going to be Thirsting Roots, Abundant Harvest, Many Partings, and Caravan Vigil. Potentially
yep,
Reclaim the Wastes. And then if you had
yep,
gates, Open the Gates would be interesting. Is
yeah,
there any gate that we would want to get? I don't think so. It could just be another duel, right?
yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I think that's fine. I don't know if I want to go any deeper. I see Brave the Wilds there, but what are we sacrificing?
Nothing.
Okay, so it's just okay. This would be kind of interesting to me if we had other things to sacrifice, like if we had like a colony garden token, or if we had a
Yeah, so Brave the Wilds is somewhat the bottom of the barrel for these types of effects and are quickly changed out for the new set. Like, I mean, you can see this is brand new. It was printed in Eldraine 2.
yeah.
So, like the next set that has a effect like this and surprise, they're going to be printing these more often. You know, you see all the upside on that Brave the Wilds.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like if we get more many partings type cards, we will want Brave the Wilds in there because making a 3/3 that has haste is going to be just really good. A 1 mana 3/3 haste that gives us a land is fabulous. I'm going to add in a couple of cards here and we're going to put them under lands. Search for Tomorrow. This is a land. This is a 1 mana land, but it's also ramp. Many Partings is a land. Caravan Vigil is a land. And we're up to so now down to 26 lands. 26 lands is starting to get a little spooky because at 26 lands, okay, so like let's do the math on it. You have 7 cards in your opening hand, and you need 2 of them to be lands, really, in this deck. And with 26, I don't think that the math pans out on that because you need 8 cards in your hand to guarantee 2, right? Yeah.
So with 8 1 mana these types of spells, I am so very comfortable being at 28 lands because when I get to my turn 6 and my turn 7,
Yeah.
like, I mean, drawing one off the top and it's like, okay, cast one, everybody take one, I gain one, get my land, play a
Mm-hmm.
land, So I basically just replaced the land that I tapped.
Yeah.
So on those turn considerations for playing slimes, it's like, oh, okay, I can manage my mana. Like, I
Yep.
mean, it just,
I'm
yeah.
gonna cut Opal Palace actually. So as we shift towards this, where we go and we're basically saying we have a lot of Ash Barrens in our decks, right?
Hmm.
Or in the deck, Opal Palace starts to become a problem because we are really going to need this to be green in our opening hand, and that's why I've reduced the swamp count. So swamp count goes down, forest count goes
Attaboy.
up, cut the Opal Palace. The
Attaboy.
other thing is Opal Palace is not going to die that much in this deck. Like it didn't die in Witherbloom Apprentice that much. It's not going to die very much here. It's going to die on accident, right? So move this to the sideboard, get that forest
One
count
of
up.
us.
Yeah,
One
baby.
of
You
us.
know what's up. And then Mortuary Mire can go as well. Colony Garden is kind of interesting because Colony Garden does work nicely with Corrupted Conviction and Village Rights, and it's green. In fact, let's look at type land. Um, ID less than or equal to green. Because there's a couple of cards that we could play here. One of them is a green something thicket, I think it is. Fertile Thicket, yeah. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. If you do, reveal one basic from among them, put it on top of your library, and the rest on the bottom of your library. So if we are doing a low land count, something like this could fit into it, where we like get to kind of cheat on lands. Turn 1, we like go find our third land, kind of a thing. It makes green. It's never a card that I've been like hyped to play.
Mm.
Colony also does work with Brave the Wilds, and that was a thought that I had as well. We could put this in sideboard. What other green? Oh, Gingerbread Cabin. Gingerbread Cabin has been rather unimpressive to me, but like I've tried putting this card in a lot of my decks, and I feel like the upside of making a food is so shit compared to everything else that all of the other cards in that cycle do. Like Witch's Cottage, like Mystic Sanctuary,
Hmm.
even Dwarven Mine is better than this, I think, in a lot of cases. Like, this card's pretty bad. Hidden Nursery, what do you think about this? Discover 4. This can hit a slime.
The rest on put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order.
That's fine. It's mainly like putting a card into your hand or casting it for free, but it's 6 mana. So, because you have to tap this and 5. So I think like I was really high on these cards at first, and the more that I've actually played them in decks, the more that I find that they almost always only work best in one color decks.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like in a mono black deck, great, because you can hit Pestilence off the top. You can hit Vicious Battle Rager. You can hit like Trailblazer's Torch.
Or Llanowar Elves.
Or Llanowar Elves, right? Yeah, not so great. But the first and second time I discovered. First time I hit Vicious Battle Rager. Second time I hit Evankar's Justice and bought it back, and it was like really, really good. So
I put Land Grant into my
Land Grant is a great idea. We should definitely be playing Land Grant.
I put it in my sideboard, I think.
Path of Ancestry, I don't think we need this as much now. It's good because there are other humans in the deck and other druids, but I also think that we have a lot of mana fixing, right? We have a lot of these 1 mana cards that can go and find any land. So a duel is not as important, right? And it's tapped. So let's cut Path of Ancestry. That's not something you'll see me do very often. But remember, we're not building around the best cards. We're building it for this deck. This deck is doing a thing, and we're trying to make it happen, right?
Well, and Witherbloom doesn't share a creature type with slimes.
It doesn't, but a lot of the mill creatures. But, I mean, I don't know. It could be good. There's also Hunter's Maze, which is pretty, I think, solid. Tokasha's Dig Site, Surveil every turn. I think we're going to have other things to do with our mana, though, to be quite honest. I don't think this is likely to be anything other than an annoying colorless source.
It's weird. That is, every time I see that card, that is like, it screams control at me.
Yeah. This is a mono black card. This is a mono black land, is the way I see it. I play this in mono black mid range decks because sometimes you just didn't use your mana on removal and you just pay some mana to surveil. And the fact that it's colorless doesn't matter in a single color deck most of the time. A Tree of Tales could go in the deck. This is another reason to play the Brave the Wilds card. Untapped green source that we can sacrifice. So actually, let's get Brave the Wilds back in there as well. Land grant. Lavert says, "What are you going to show them? Slimes?" Yeah, surprise, surprise,
You're
motherfucker.
gonna show them their death.
Yeah, land grant. I think land grant's a good one. Yeah, that's a.
I put it in my considering.
I'm gonna do that, and actually, I think we can go down on swamps pretty deep, can't we?
And the reason why, yeah, because we're not. You took out the file.
Erosium basics or moxes, he says.
Yeah. Yeah, the reason why I didn't put land grant immediately into the list is because I'm still shooting for the opportunity of having at least 2 lands in my opening hand.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm an aggressive mulliganer. Like I will go 6 deep without even thinking about it. That's 21 cards, worth of visibility. I mean, you get some duplicates if you don't shuffle right, but
yeah,
like I take no qualms whatsoever in mulliganing my hand.
I'm happy to mull to 6. Like this format.
Based on my position, in the pod, if I'm first, now that's a good opportunity to talk about something interesting. So if I'm playing this deck in the first position, I'm basically taking more of a control role because I know that I'm not going to be fast.
Yeah.
Right? Especially if there's a combo deck. So if I'm playing first, then I'm going to skew more control, like removal, so that way I can have my land up, and then when it gets around to their turn, boom, clip them, get to my turn, progress the board state, yada yada yada. If I'm playing last,
you're the beat.
You're the beatdown.
Yeah, which is weird, right? That's not how I think a lot of people would think about it. Like an aggro deck is very excited to be turn 1 or position 1 or position 2. This deck is kind of like your positioning, and who at the table is going to be really determining like whether you're the beatdown or not. But the positioning is actually part of that as well. So I've gotten it down to 104. So let's do something really quick here. We're going to take all the cards in the sideboard. And we're going to cut these out and put them under considering. And then what we're going to do is move some of our really premium cards into the sideboard that we're going to have to figure out room for. Coffin Purge, Vines of Vastwood, and Rotten Reunion. And this is just so we can playtest, right? Because I want to be able to playtest the deck, and we can't do it with 104 cards in it that well. Mm-hmm. Erosium says, with a low land count, Grant gets much better. I had to pull it out of Quandrix because it was just never free. Yeah. Well, right, because Quandrix is like a weird home for land grant because you're always getting spells. You're always getting lands into your hand with Quandrix. Every time you cast a spell, you are going to get a land into your hand. Yeah, it definitely is a nombo right there. So let's go and cut. Let's cut Mutant's Prey. I think Mutant's Prey is the close to being dead. So let's try this. This hand is gasoline. Absolutely ridiculous. I think we go turn 1. So do we take a turn off? Do we go turn 1 Shriekhorn, turn 2 Haunted Mire, or and then because we won't be able to we can't do Slimes and Witherbloom. Okay, actually, here's what we do. We go draw. Oh, Seeds of Hope is pretty good though. Okay, so we'll go Haunted Mire, turn 2, another Slime, play our Witherbloom. Next turn, and then we're going to go land into... Actually, let's go 1, 2, Winding Way, trigger.
Everybody take 1.
So we're going to go up to here, and we're going to actually track our opponent's life total based on how much they've taken. So they take 1, Winding Way, and then we're going to look at the top 4. And we were looking for lands, of course. So we're going to mill, get a land. And then forest, 1 mana Seeds of Hope.
So
Trigger
you're on
again.
turn.
This
You're
is turn
three.
3, and we've
What are
dealt
your
6 damage.
what are your points of interaction on this turn 3? Like, what
Uh,
do you have available to you?
right here, nothing currently. Yeah, our mill didn't hit any of our black cards, so Spinning Darkness is not fabulous right now, but we do have a Shriekhorn, which is going to put a lot of things in the graveyard. We have 1 black card.
I always take the opportunity, and I recommend everybody watching do this as well. As you're goldfishing, turn 3 is probably a good point to sit there and go, okay, what are my points of interaction? What's available to me? What do I need to be able to meaningfully, like, turns 3 and 4?
Yeah.
And I mean, the answer could be nothing, but
Sometimes
also,
it
like,
is, yeah.
but take stock
Yeah.
of where you're sitting at in this moment, and then if it's important to you to be meaningfully interactive at this particular juncture, that's when you need to lean into those mulligans.
So here we have our first slime. This is a pretty bad mill, I'll be honest here. This is like pretty terrible. Usually when you mill this many, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you should have milled 2 slimes in. So our first slime here should be a 4/4, but instead it's going to be a 2/2, like that. And then we're going to draw for turn, and this is kind of where you just sort of like Shriekhorn, mill 1, 2, slime in the graveyard, Rubble Belt Maverick. Rubble Belt's actually a nice mill here because we go 1, 2, 3, slime. This is going to be a 4/4. And then we're going to go 1 mana, exile the Rubble Belt, and make this one a 3/3. Or we could actually make...
It's 2 counters from the cast, and then it counts the 2. Okay, so yeah, that's 4.
Yeah, so the way that works is that it's 4, and then this resolves, and it goes in the graveyard. Yeah, unfortunately, because it looks like a lot. And by the way, as a little trick here, for those of you who are Moxfield playtest enjoyers, the way I recommend you do this is put these in the graveyard, like this, and then go here and make an Infinitoken.
Slime.
And then you do slime like this. And then you go count like that. And make sure not to cover up the bottom left because that's where you're going to put your counters. And this is going to show people how many there are. And then you can put them in the graveyard. You see that? So now this is a quick way to say, okay, when I cast the slime, how much bigger is it going to get? So we've dealt... So everybody should be at 26 right now. And then they're going to take another... They will have taken 7 more, probably from an attacker and an attacker. I did put it on the Witherbloom Apprentice just so that it doesn't die to any like random 2 sweepers, I think it's better that it doesn't die here. And then draw. And this is kind of what slime decks look like, okay? It's like, what do we have? We have like 4 slimes in hand. So do the math. How much power is this in hand? We have 5, 11... Wait, 5, 11, 18, 26. This is 26 power right here.
What turn is that? Turn 6?
Turn 6. Mm-hmm. And
how's
so...
how's that Spinning Darkness looking?
Spinning Darkness right now looks as bad as I've ever seen a Spinning Darkness, but these mills have been terrible though, dude.
Yeah.
Like these, there should be 2, 3. We have 2.
One of those things, like, as I'm goldfishing, these are the things that I'm thinking
if
of.
This happens multiple times, like if this starts to become a regular thing, then we can cut it for sure. I just don't think that it will. I think that this is a bit abnormal. Erosia mentions Experiment 1. This is a card we've talked about. Might be one of those that I try in the Slimes deck as I curve out. The thing about Experiment 1 is that it is a slime, and so it does help the slimes get bigger. But Experiment 1 on any turn other than turn 1 blows. It is terrible. It is really bad. And so I think that if you are really concerned about having like a great turn 1 play, then that's fine. Also recognize too that most of the time Experiment 1 is coming at the cost of a slime against humanity. And most of the time, most of your individual slime cards in your deck are milled, not played. So
Hmm.
we could look at it and say, okay, at the very worst, at the very worst, it's a slime that goes in the graveyard. At the very best, it's a turn one play that's gross. Because actually, turn one slime, turn two Witherbloom Apprentice, turn three slime is very, very high tempo, right? And it's also a slime that doesn't die, but it's also a slime that doesn't have trample. So, this is a very common like play pattern here that you're gonna have, where you're just gonna like cast, and this is gonna be a 6/6, right? Like that, and you know, like the game doesn't get a whole lot more interesting. I will say that slime decks are a little bit boring.
Hmm.
They're good, but like this is what our game plan looks like right here. Like we're not even casting the ram through right now. Like we're just like
Xerox. You're just carbon
slime,
copy.
slime, 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 mill, slime, slime, mill, mill, slime. You know, it's just like very, it's a bit numbing, I will be honest. And it's kind of funny because when you do the thing, I have noticed this dynamic where when you do the thing in slime decks, you no longer care whether you win or not because you did the thing. I kind of get what
Hmm.
casual players vibe with a little bit when I play slime. Not because it's
I
a
don't
casual
understand it
deck,
all.
not because it's a casual deck, but because when I put 52 power into play, the power fantasy was achieved. I felt
Yeah.
like I'd hit the top of the ladder there. So um,
It's stiff and flaccid at the same
yeah,
time.
that's right. So here, this is a good one. Let's try it again. What do we have here? We have two lands. We have an
All right,
abundant harvest.
last one, and
Yep,
Papa
and then we're
Clay has
gonna
to.
yeah. Then you can bounce here, and then we'll probably finish up pretty quickly after that. But okay, draw. We need to go Tranquil Thicket. Oh, that's really good. Maybe what we do here is we go Abundant Harvest, find a swamp, play the swamp, psych. Uh, we probably want to cast this when Witherbloom is out, so we'll cycle
Hmm.
Troll of Khazad-dûm. Oh no 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 no! What we want to do here? Let's shuffle this back into our bottom of the deck. We're gonna get a forest like that, and then actually we don't know what land we would get, but let's just say it's a forest for the sake of argument. Cycle this, find a swamp, get the swamp. Okay, and then we go next turn. Oh, we drew a land, unfortunately, but that's okay. We're gonna this is gonna be free pretty soon here. So we go swamp or tree of tails,
How many is that? What is that first land?
a
Do you even
tranquil
have
thicket.
black? Do you have black?
Sorry, Lobert. What I did was I deterministically found a forest. That's not actually how it works, but I should have revealed cards off the top, but I forgot. So yeah, um, yeah. No. Let's
Do
see.
you have black available for Witherbloom?
Uh, yes,
Okay.
forest and thicket. Yep. And then what we'll do here is we probably go um, one mana for Shriekhorn. Get our things all ordered here. One mana for Shriekhorn with three counters on it. Mill two. One, two. And then we
Get
pay
out of
one,
here.
two, Glowspore Shaman. One, two, three. Okay, that's our first slime. And then we're going to put a land on top of our library. Does it say you may? You may. Um,
You got 4 lands plus a land grant.
I might as well put it into hand, right? Like this. You might as
Um,
well. Like it just means the land grant's going to be slower. But that's okay. It's going to get us a land at some point. And it's free, so do that there. And then next turn, this is that turn 4 slime that we're talking about, right? Is play the forest. That's more important than the swamp. And we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to mill 2. Jesus, still not milling any slimes, which is, again, this is highly improbable.
so what are your now we're on turn 4, which is a little turn behind. I wanted to ask, what are your points of interaction here? I can't see behind my
We don't have any interaction this hand. Which again, somewhat atypical because we have a lot of interaction in the deck. Actually, we have like what 15 pieces, not a lot, but we have enough, right? We're not ever going to be like a deeply interactive deck. I think is part of the thing. Slime decks that have more than 10 pieces of interaction, that's a good thing, which is kind of why I like this over the Simic even, right? Okay, so we got the slime there, and then we go next turn. Okay, so this is actually kind of nice. We go land. This is our last mill. This is our third counter here. 1, 2. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. And then we go 1, 2. Actually, we're going to go first land grant for free. And we're going to go and get a forest. And we're going to put that into our hand. And then we're going to go 1, 2, grapple with the past, mill 3. And then we're going to get a land. So let's get a... Oh, I see what we were talking about earlier. Yeah, so this just should have been it wouldn't have disrupted it. We had all these different ways to find land, but this should have been a swamp. So we'll just get a swamp. There we go. And then we go slime. And now it's a 6/6. I like 3-mana 6/6 tramples. What about you, Clay?
I mean, my mom says they're good.
My mama says they're good. And then we cast the 7/7. Here we go.
Yeah, see, it's definitely in the turn 6, turn 7, turn.
I mean, this is how games end. Not with like a 22/22 slime that doesn't one-shot people but deals a lot of damage. Slimes end games with 7/7 tramples. Because 7/7 is huge in this format.
A go for the throat flies in the face of the combo variants of the slime decks.
Mm-hmm.
Because for one card, I can sit there and take away your big fatty.
And it's still a lot of damage. Yeah. Echoing Truth is the worst possible thing that can happen to this deck. And we're going to lose to Echoing Truth for sure. Just mark my words, folks. Echoing Truth is brutal. But, you know, here we are. And now we're flooded. But the funny thing is, like, this is just a lot, right?
You're flooded on how many lands?
Oh, you know what? I should have grabbed Troll with Grapple instead of the land. This is Creature. So we get Troll, and now we would just be casting Troll. That's great. Or we could have gotten... did we mill a Gray Slat in here? No, we didn't. Erosium says, "That's it. I'm brewing Wood Sage." I think you're memeing. I think I sense a memeing, joking tone. Wood Sage is not very good for this, but
so Ryan, look at this situation here. We're on turn 7, and you've got an abundance of lands. So I predict that as you keep goldfishing this, this is going to be 60 or better % of your draws, your plays will look something like this, and now you'll start to see with those pieces that are like, okay, mill, get a land, go find a land, you know, all of that.
Cards like Grapple with the Past.
It's so cumulative, and that's why I'm sitting at 28 lands right now.
I've got less lands than you, though. I don't think we can go any deeper. I've got 24.
You're at 24 lands.
Bro, I'm 4 steps ahead of you. We're at 24 lands. So that right there, that turn cycle is very unusual, I think. To have that many lands and to hit a land every single time when they're only a quarter of your draws is abnormal. Okay, so we have to be able to look at these draws, I think, and folks will understand this. You have to be able to look at your draws when you're playtesting and say, like, should this happen? Like, if you play a game and you playtest a game till turn 10 or to turn 9, like turn 9 is a good way to do it. Playtest a game till turn 9 and you draw no removal in your deck with 20 kill spells. Is that going to happen very often? Should you add more kill spells because you didn't draw them? No. You just didn't draw them because sometimes Magic is a bitch and you get the wrong end variance, right? Like you need to be like cognizant of what should be happening in your deck. If you're not drawing draw spells and you have 20 of them in your deck, it's not because you need more. It's because you just didn't draw them in that game, and that's okay. So in this game, yeah, just mulligan better, right? Like, yeah, and in this case, like, we drew 9 lands, or we had 9 lands, and that's a little bit weird, right? But that's okay. Yeah, no. Erosium says, we're out here playing Rogsai with that land count of 24. 24 is lower than Sailor's Bane. No, it's about as low as Sailor's Bane, actually, which is very, very unusual. Lobert says, I've been stunned that I've built some functional decks with 24 lands. I am stunned about that too. That is not very many. I mean, when we go down and look at this, that's 1.7 lands per opening hand. Now, are we talking about 24 actual mana sources? Because that's ludicrous. Because this is not 24 land sources. This is 32 land sources. But instead of choosing to play lands, we're choosing to play 1 mana spells that get us a land, like an Ash Barrens, right? Yeah. So.
And yeah, this will not be normal.
Yeah.
For deck construction. Only certain types of decks can handle this. So don't tread with caution.
Yeah, if you're like a Dragon's Rage channeler, you can run a lower land count because you can always find them when you need, and you don't really want lands. This is kind of the same thing as Witherbloom Apprentice, where you just want spells instead, and it can draw cards when it needs to. Sailor's Bane is another one where you want all your things to be spells, and you have ways to find lands with like Lorien Revealed and other things like that. Very, very few decks can do this. Very few decks. This is actually very interesting as a deck building art package to talk about, because Abundant Harvest, Caravan Vigil, Many Partings, Search for Tomorrow, Thirsting Roots, Land Grant is a package that in a deck like this, that's a Spellslinger deck, so this is very, very unusual. It allows you to play a very low land count because you just want spells when you top deck these later on, not lands. Spells that equal lands are great, especially like if you're doing this on turn 3 and you haven't, turn 4. Say turn 4 you don't draw your land, which is probably statistically correct. You go search for a land, play the land, slime. Right? Like it just fits into the curve nicely, I think. Mm-hmm. So this is definitely very cool. Well, with that, Clay, I think we're gonna let you go here. You gotta get you your beauty rest, and I gotta go have dinner with my partner. And of course, I'll kind of wrap things up for us here. But we're going to answer your question here, Dave. If you got any quick questions you want to ask, this is the time to do it. Rapid fire them out because we're about to sign off here. Dave says, are you worried about not having more card draw? Most of your card draw slots are kind of more so land specific. I think that's a fair criticism. And I think that maybe what we could do is we could explore, playing more cards. Like we could just play Sign and Blood Night's Whisper, which I actually don't have in here, and I should. Yeah, although Sign and Blood is double black.
Yeah, for my list, I'm thinking about going down from 30 slimes and adding to 28 and adding 2 more card draw spells. And the reason why I'm thinking about that is I already, under current conditions, I'm already have a late game hand full of slimes that I'm casting 1Z, 2Z at a time, which means that I've either burned through all my removal in the early turns and I don't have any, or I'm in some circumstance where I just don't have options in that late game. The only options I have is slime. So I was thinking about breaking that up by adding, some cheap card advantage, over 2 slimes. So that way I can choose whether or not I, have the slimes, or I'm basically controlling or attempting to control the quality of my hand in that later game by, adding a couple of different spells.
That makes sense. And I think that that's a really great question there, Dave, about the number of card draw spells we play here. And Clay, if you were to go down on your slime count, I think that statistically you could go down to 25, because the difference between 28 and 25 isn't a break point statistically. The break point is at 25 and 33. So you're either playing you're either playing like
and it might end up like that.
33 to mill 1 off of a mill 3, or
I tend to make changes 2 cards at a time, just to kind of ease myself, because I'll go to a certain point, and then when I start experiencing something different, I'll back it up and split that difference.
So like what cards would we draw with in this deck that we would want? Because I don't think we want I don't know if we want Sign and Blood. I'm a little scared that we're not going to have black, but maybe that's just wrong.
Well, I mean, this is a matter of with those 1 mana land spells, which
They will
lands
find
you.
us black.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. Sometimes it may be dead, but that's okay. And then what about the other plunder effects, like Deadly Dispute or Reckoner's Bargain, or actually it'd be
that
Fanatical Offering and Deadly Dispute would be the other two.
that tends to get a little complicated because, as you well know, mono black has a nice suite of like a plunder suite
Yeah.
that includes the the wellspring and the new metaphysic whatever,
Oh, Mephitic
artifact
Draught.
draw.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the those the plunder suite has artifacts built into it, whether or not they be food or blood or
Yep.
treasure or what have you. And once you cast one, that suite of spells feeds off of each other,
They do.
and we're
They
not
chain.
and we're not necessarily set up to take advantage of that here.
I will
So you would
say,
have to.
I mean, it is worth mentioning. Witherbloom Apprentice is much more incidental in this deck than it is in other Witherbloom decks, where you wouldn't be super happy to sacrifice it. But say you go end step, and you just say, you know what, I need to find another slime. Are we happy to trade Witherbloom Apprentice to find a slime? I think I am. So I think if
Are
you go
you playing the village?
Village Rites and Corrupted Conviction are in here, and the reason I'm thinking about this is because we could just say Witherbloom Apprentice is also just a piece of fodder because it's as an additional cost, right? We are casting it.
Well, conversely, Sign in Blood and Night's Whisper basically just continue down that train of like, okay, I'm leaning into Witherbloom as part of my process.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, like late game, you cast your Sign in Blood, you draw 2 cards, that's 1 trigger off of Witherbloom. You cast the other 2 cards, that's 2 more triggers off of Witherbloom.
Yeah.
You know,
So let's do this here as
you can't get that off of the Fanatical.
I'm gonna reduce our slime count dramatically here. Let's go to 25 because breakpoint of 25, breakpoint of 33, right? 25, we want a quarter or we want a third, right? So let's go to 25 and a quarter. We have 99 cards. I've just added a bunch of draw. Do we want to add Siphon Mind? Siphon Mind would be pretty good here, I think. Like that. There we go. We're still at 62 instants and sorceries. That is crazy, dude. That is very, very high. I like this, and thank you for that comment, Dave. I appreciate it. I think that's a really good point. We kind of missed that along the way, and it's always been something I've noticed with slime decks is that so many of the mill cards in green, they mill you to get a land back, right? And the lands aren't, like they're not really what we want. We'd love to just be able to get slimes back, or
unless you're cycling the lands.
Unless you're cycling the lands, which is good. We do have 2 of those that we can do. So I think this is a good way to go at it here. And then the question is going to be over time, how do we make room for some of these like Coffin Purge, Rotten Reunion, Mutant's Prey, Vines of Astwood? Your mileage will vary on Rotten Reunion and Coffin Purge based on how many graveyard decks you're dealing with. So this is meta dependent. And then cards like Nature's Claim and Natural State I think are always going to be pretty good. But if you're fighting, this is mostly combo. Like we are not affected by aura removal that much at all. Like if somebody like Witness protections your slime or your Witherbloom Apprentice, we just don't care. Slime, if they do that, it actually makes it bigger. It just takes away trample. But yeah, so I think this is a really sweet deck, and I think this is just adding another angle to the slime story. And Clay, I'm going to add you on as a co-editor to this one here. Just show the work that we've put into it together, as we do with all other people who participate in these live streams. And if you have any ideas for better nicknames for the deck, I thought Venom was kind of cool. The idea of like you got these like big, big beefy,
Plus we're green, for God's sakes. Look at us.
Yeah, look at us.
It's on theme.
We're basically like, although this is a little bit more Hulk energy, isn't it, though? A little bit more Hulk. Okay, my eyes are red, too, which made that even better. Ben says, I also think cutting the slimes down to 25 might have a bit more fun, because there's a bit more spell variance as a player. I don't see spell variances as fun, personally. I have fun when my decks play well, even when I lose. But that's just me. And then Erosium asks, when's the next stream? Next stream will either be Thursday if I decide to get a game going, which of course, if you're interested in having priority for those games, you go through the Patreon, sign up at that $2 level, or if you want to do more, you're welcome to do that as well. That does get you priority to the live streamed games. I'm also going to be doing some coaching sessions. We have a coaching client who I'm working with right now for a tournament play and whatnot. That's a great way to look at that as well. But with that, we are going to wrap things up. The answer to your question directly here, Erosium, is every Monday. Every Monday is Let's Build. We build something fun. And of course, if you want to participate in that discussion and give me any ideas about what you'd like to see built, that's a great way to do it as well, is to join that Patreon at patreon.com/common connoisseurs. And with that, Clay, thank you so much for joining us today, man. It's been really a pleasure having you back again. It's just like the good old days. It's really fabulous. And I want to thank you also for bringing such a cool concept to the format, but also to like revive good old Wither Chad, man. Witherbloom Apprentice is the GOAT, and it's really exciting to see new life in this.
I've been wanting to build this for years, and as you saw, I already have the slimes. It's finally happening.
Hell yeah. Very exciting. And Clay, let us know any other things we need to know about for upcoming things, or where to follow you, and where to keep in touch.
So, ironically, I'm recording a deal with Lobert tomorrow night, so look for that later on this week. I have a to be determined. I'll be showing up on a Legacy channel stream later this week. Hint: not to talk about Legacy. Of course, we have the Sanctuary tournament coming up in a couple of weeks. Challenge you all to pick up a deck and come fight me. And then, really, like, this is just the beginning. Like, Chicago unlocked like a next level, and there's some big things on the horizon this year.
Oh yeah.
So be on the lookout.
Keep an eye out. You can follow him on Twitter as well. The link to his social media is in the comments below. You can always tag him in the Common Connoisseurs if you have any questions. Send him DMs that way. And then of course, make sure to join the cpedh.guide server as well if you want to keep up to date with some of those broader format updates that affect competitive Pauper Commander in cPDH. But with that, once again, thank you so much, Clay. And for all of you watching, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure having you. It's always so incredible when we have like a very interactive group of people, and you were exactly that today. So it was really great. I think the recommendations you had were on point, and I think the deck is better for having had you here. So thank you all for joining us today. And wherever you are in the multiverse, we're going to catch you on the battlefield. Peace out, friends. See ya.